Chapter 1600. Kang Tae-chu, you are too arrogant. This is the skeleton of the ruins Emperor's divine consort. Are you courting death? This is treason. This is the greatest provocation to our ruins Emperor's lineage. Today, he must be killed to show the world that the ruins Emperor's lineage is not to be insulted. The ruins of immortality royalty is supreme. It is not to be blasphemed. Kill him. Grind his bones to dust and extract his soul. Only by burning it in a fiendish fire for 10,000 years can we vent our hatred. Many royalty clamored as their hatred surged. They gnashed their teeth, yearning to charge forward and fight Jiang Tian, tearing Jiang Tian to pieces. The divine consort's skeleton was their ancestor, but how could they tolerate having her head sent flying by Jiang Tian's slap? It was a smack to their faces. This was intolerable to the prideful and arrogant people who believed themselves to be superior to others. Kang Tae-chu, you must have had enough of living. Divine Emperor Inferno roared as his deep eyes burned with flames of fury. His hair flared in anger as he took a step forward. Two flaming wheels rose beneath his feet, allowing him to move as fast as lightning as he charged at Jiang Tian. Divine Emperor Inferno has reigned supreme for 10,000 years. His name has shaken the ruins of immortality. Kang Tae-chu is no match for him. Kang Tae-chu, no matter how strong you are only an ant compared to Divine Emperor Inferno. Kang Tae-chu, your life is coming to an end. How dare you provoke Divine Emperor Inferno? That is a violation of the heavens. The Divine Emperor will trample you beneath his feet like a dog. The royalty and guards cheered in excitement. Banners filled the sky as war drums shook the 9 heavens and 10 lands. Jiang Tian used the Kun Peng's extreme speed while Divine Emperor Inferno used the attainment formula of the Ruins Emperor's 9 heavens art. Both of them were movement techniques that were best at speed. They far exceeded Ghost Wolf and Yun Zhongzi's void-tearing art. They were truly evenly matched. Chi. Under the extreme speed of the two, the distance of more than 100 miles was covered in the blink of an eye. The two had already collided in the blink of an eye. No one saw the collision this time clearly, but there were great Tao sounds that sounded, extremely mysterious and complex. It was like the sound of Buddhist chanting, like the evening drum and morning bell, and like the vast celestial sound that came down from the 9 heavens. It was solemn, vast, marvelous, and profound. This is the sound of the great Tao. The moment the two of them attacked, it was a collision of the great Tao level. Retreat. Children, activate the protective formation. Many heavenly grotto heaven sect masters cried out in alarm. Their expressions changed drastically because they knew how terrifying this collision was. Rumble. The void collapsed, and all directions were annihilated. This was a type of great destruction. Cracks appeared in the void, intertwining with the laws and flames. Astral winds howled, destroying everything. The terrifying fluctuations were like hundreds of nuclear weapons exploding at the same time. The space crack could even be called an abyss. It extended for 10 miles. Wherever it passed, mountains collapsed and the earth sank. There were even meteors with a radius of 1 mile that suddenly fell from the sky, leaving long trails of light behind them. They pierced through the mountain peaks and ignited flames that soared into the sky. The collision between the two of them had actually affected the outer space. So powerful. Many cultivators who had activated the formation were bleeding from their ears and on the verge of collapse. Even the soul formation overlords didn't dare to be careless and retreated one after another. This was only the first attack between the two of them. Neither of them used their full strength. It was just a kind of contact and testing. It was far from reaching the climax. But it was already so terrifying. No one could predict what kind of terrifying scene would occur later. Kang Tae-chu, you are indeed very powerful. No wonder you dare to provoke the empire of the immortal ruins. But, this will be your end. In my eyes, you'll always be an ant from a peripheral planet. You're not worthy of my attention. On the battlefield, Divine Emperor Lihua retreated to the ancient chariot and stood proudly. He wasn't injured. His eyes were cold, but there were flames lingering around them. His black hair fluttered in the wind, his armor was bright and his robe was blood-red. His broad chest and burly figure gave people a sense of oppression. This was the majesty of an emperor. He was high and mighty, with monstrous power and peerless energy. Ha, I'm an ant. However, this ant killed your descendants and killed your brothers. Jiang Tian stood with his hands behind his back and a mocking expression on his face. The black-clothed Jiang Tian's eyes were deep like the stars in the sky. His expression was indifferent, giving people a feeling that he was at ease. He was very elegant and otherworldly, as if he was an immortal that didn't belong to the mortal world. In the eyes of ordinary people, Jiang Tian seemed to be a bit weaker than Divine Emperor Lihua. It was like the relationship between a god and a mortal, a king and a subject. But some sect masters of Grotto Heavens found that Jiang Tian's every breath and movement seemed to be part of the Dharma laws and the Grand Tao. That kind of connection was extremely close. Jiang Tian said in a lukewarm tone. And what can you do to me? Aren't we just watching with our eyes wide open, unable to do anything about it? Kang Te-Chu, you've successfully angered me. Divine Emperor Lihua was furious and his eyes were full of hatred. He grabbed the handle of the blade on his back with his right hand and pulled it out inch by inch. Every inch of this flaming mystic saber would shoot out thousands of beams of saint light and divine light. It was as if a sun had risen, and it was dazzling. At the same time, there was a burning power like a volcanic eruption in all directions. The rolling heat waves were too terrifying. In the blink of an eye, all the trees within a 100-mile radius were burnt to ashes. In the second blink of an eye, the mountain range within a 10-mile radius turned into a flood of lava. The 1,000-foot mountains collapsed like melted wax. The soul formation overlords in the distance were all startled and couldn't help but step back. Apart from the terrifying heat waves, they also felt a terrifying murderous intent. This was a terrifying mentality that said, if I can't do it, who can do it? It was as if he was the master of this world, and everything was under his control. This Inferno Blade is just a name we're used to calling it. Its real name is the Emperor Inferno Tribulation Blade. An expert at the level of a living fossil stared at the saber. His face was full of respect, and his eyes were fixed on the saber as he said word by word. It's the Emperor Inferno Tribulation Blade. I heard that the old ruins emperor gave birth to the heavenly fire tribulation when he went through the soul formation tribulation. However, His Majesty, the old ruins emperor, was a man of great talent and vision. He used the 9 heavens astral fire to refine the saber and condensed a portion of his Tao fruit as a spirit-severing cultivator. This blade is too powerful. It's almost a sacred weapon. Killing soul formation cultivators is as easy as killing chickens. Many cultivators from the ruins of deity exclaimed with admiration in their eyes. An extremely scorching aura that seemed to be able to burn everything spread out. Every time the Emperor's blazing fire calamity saber rose an inch, thousands of divine might would rush out, causing the distant mountains to melt, the earth to crack, and the water vapor and smoke to distort the void. Furthermore, this was merely the aftermath of the natural explosion before it was activated. In the end, there was an explosion. The blade was completely in the hands of the Inferno Divine Emperor. He stood on the ancient chariot and slashed towards Jiang Tian. I heard that you have a peerless sword called the Heaven Extinguishing Sword. Its use by Jun Zhongli, the loser of the previous dynasty. Take it out. At that moment, the Inferno Divine Emperor was full of confidence and roared loudly. How could Kang Te-Chu fight with such a blade in hand? He didn't have enough power. You think you're qualified to make me use the Heaven Extinguishing Sword? That sword was prepared for the Emperor of the Ruins. Jiang Tian snickered. He reached out his right hand and slapped. He had resisted the peerless attack of the Inferno Divine Emperor with his body. Nobody had thought that such a situation would happen. Jiang Tian was only a nascent soul cultivator, an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. However, the Inferno Divine Emperor was a soul formation cultivator with a powerful Tao artifact, and Jiang Tian could resist it with his body? The world was turning upside down. Jiang Tian didn't use any divine powers or Dharma laws. He just charged forward and fought in close combat with his body. Jiang Tian's punches and kicks were extremely simple. There was nothing fancy about them, but his power and speed were so fast that they were unparalleled in the world. He was on par with the Inferno Divine Emperor, who was holding a supreme Tao artifact. Boom! Jiang Tian threw a punch and the world was turned upside down. All kinds of light flashed and the ground exploded. The mountains collapsed and the sky was torn apart. Kill! The Inferno Divine Emperor shouted anxiously. The Tribulation Saber contained the power of the Soul Formation Fire Tribulation. It was as if a soul formation cultivator was going through a tribulation. The Dharma laws of fire rumbled and it could easily destroy 10 soul formation cultivators. And yet, it couldn't even leave a white mark on Jiang Tian's body. Whoosh! As the Inferno Divine Emperor slashed, phoenixes, white tigers and Xian Wu, all kinds of phenomena swooped down like gods. Those were the heavenly fire tribulation that the Ruins Emperor had encountered when he was a soul formation cultivator. He had gathered them with his divine power and Dharma power and refined them into the arcane saber. Normal soul formation cultivators wouldn't be able to withstand it for more than a second. Break! Jiang Tian's eyes were glittering. He shot into the sky like a dragon and punched the sky. The Kunpeng quickly created a crack in the dimension. At that moment, his body was like a heavenly saber, cutting through the world like a torpedo and rampaging like a tiger in a flock of sheep. He tore apart the fire phenomena, but not a single strand of his hair was burned. That was the power of the chaotic divine body. Chaos was the original substance that created the world and gave birth to everything. The chaotic divine body was like a King Kong to a rope when compared to the Dharma laws of a normal soul formation cultivator. Even if the King Kong was just a baby, it couldn't be strangled to death by a rope. No matter how thick it was, it would be useless. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Tian had arrived in front of the Inferno Divine Emperor. He leaned back and punched the Emperor Fire Tribulation Saber. Clang! With one punch, a small part of the Emperor's blazing Fire Tribulation Saber shattered. The blazing godly Emperor's arm was instantly shaken to the point where divine blood flowed out. Besides, the fragments of the Tribulation Saber shot out and a few of them cut into the Inferno Divine Emperor's arm, burning with flames. The temperature was terrifying. Everyone was shocked. Jiang Tian had destroyed a supreme Tao artifact with one punch. He wasn't a human cultivator, he was more like a deity in heaven. Poof! The Inferno Divine Emperor was very decisive. He raised the broken saber and slashed down. His blood was surrounded by flames as he cut off his right arm. Divine Emperor! At that moment, countless members of the royal family yelled. Many of the divine generals and divine guards were also shocked. They had just been saying that Jiang Tian was no match for the Inferno Divine Emperor. They had never thought that Jiang Tian would be able to shake the heavenly saber with his body and break one of the Inferno Divine Emperor's arms in the second round. Chapter 1601. On the other side. Jiang Tian didn't press the attack after shattering the Blade of Calamity. Instead, he flew backward and looked at Divine Emperor Lai Hua mockingly. Yes. Mockery. At this moment, the feeling that Jiang Tian gave people was like an old cat that was toying with a mouse in the palm of its hand. He was extremely confident and fearless. Even if I give you a chance, you still won't be able to escape. Kang Te Chu, how dare you hurt me? With a loud roar, Divine Emperor Lai Hu rode his chariot and retreated rapidly. He did not dare to fight Jiang Tian in close quarters. His eyes were filled with dread and fear. The hundreds of thousands of cultivators on the 1,000-mile battlefield were all silent. They were deeply shocked. No one had expected this outcome. Divine Emperor Lai Hua, whose name had been passed down through the ages and was unbeatable in the future, had lost an arm. Even the Blade of Calamity, which contained the tribulation of heavenly fire and a trace of the old ruins Emperor's Dao fruit, had been destroyed. Countless members of the royal family, divine generals, and divine guards were shocked and panicked, but they couldn't make a sound. It was so shocking that they had lost the ability to speak. All they could do was stare in shock. Kang Taechu was too strong. They had thought of him as an ant and a clown at first, then as a demon, a murderer, a bandit, and a thief. In short, he was nothing to be proud of, but he had broken their divine emperor's arm. The royal family and nobles had been full of confidence and arrogance, thinking that Jiang Tian would end up like the divine generals of the ancient heavenly court. They thought that he was just a small loach that couldn't cause any big waves. And yet, this had happened. Divine Emperor Lai Hua, who was the direct descendant of the old ruins emperor and claimed to be on par with the three unparalleled giants, had suffered a great loss. Many members of the royal family and nobles felt their faces burn. It's hard to predict who will win this battle. A person who looked like a living fossil stared at Jiang Tian with a strange light in his eyes. If we go up against Kang Taechu, I'm afraid our chances of winning are slim. This kid is really evil. He's truly invincible. That's right. As of now, he hasn't used the power of the nascent soul or his dermic powers. He's only using his physical body. Several Heavenly Grotto sect masters with extremely high status looked at each other in dismay. They could see the fear and vigilance on each other's faces. Heavens, how is this possible? As for Song Baoxin, Qing Aojuan, and the other disciples of the academy, they were already dumbfounded and frightened. When the news of Jiang Tian first spread to the ruins of immortality, these academy disciples only regarded Jiang Tian as a bandit. They all had the idea of killing Jiang Tian to establish their prestige. They thought that Jiang Tian was just a stepping stone for them to improve their cultivation and to be recognized by the dynasty of the ruins of immortality. But at this moment, seeing Jiang Tian suppressing the inferno godly emperor, they felt as if they were looking up at a high mountain, like an ant at the foot of Mount Tai. They felt that Jiang Tian was unreachable and could never be surpassed. This guy is extremely lucky and his cultivation speed is extremely fast. He's at least 10 times stronger than in the Steel Forest Forbidden Grounds. Ban Shan's forehead was covered with sweat. He was very worried. If he were to fight against Jiang Tian now, he had no confidence at all. Crack, crack, crack. Divine Emperor Lai Hua's right arm trembled and his bones cracked. He was performing the swordsman secret art of the 9 heavenly arts, but his attainment and understanding of this art were 10 times deeper than Divine Emperor Hanshi's. The Dharma laws of fire from all directions surged into his broken arm and it was restored to perfect condition in a blink. Divine Emperor, be careful. Many members of the royal family warned with worried eyes. If it weren't for the fact that they were in public, they would probably persuade Divine Emperor Lai Hua to stop the battle and order the 6 Grotto Heavens and the army to besiege Kang Taechu. They didn't believe that they couldn't kill this villain. Divine Emperor Lai Hua was furious. He had never suffered such a great loss since the day he was born. His face was cold, but his eyes were burning with anger as if they could burn thousands of worlds. He was invincible when he fought in the ruins of immortality and even suppressed the 7 great bandits. But now, he was severely injured. Kill! Divine Emperor Lai Hua was furious. He put his sword back into its sheath and made a gesture with both hands. He pressed on his forehead and suddenly opened a vertical eye. The flame in the vertical eye flickered, and a huge fusang tree appeared in front of it. Its leaves were like gold essence, and they made clanging sounds. 9 golden crows flew out from the branches, and they were like 9 suns that flickered in the sky. Boom! The 9 golden divine birds were surrounded by flames and burned everything. Even the bronze chariot under Divine Emperor Lai Hua's feet seemed to be melting. All kinds of law threads in the world were torn apart, and the rules collapsed and were destroyed. Sun Sutra. Someone exclaimed, recognizing this technique. This was a supreme technique that was on par with the 9 great heavenly techniques of the ruins Emperor Palace. Riding a starry sky Dharma artifact, one could get infinitely close to a star and intercept the true sun fire precepts and great Tao fragments. By sacrificing them into one's body and God, one could produce true sun fire. It was said that Divine Emperor Lihua had the help of the ruins Emperor Palace, Teacher, and Sky Palace to cultivate this technique back then. He actually cultivated true sun fire. Many people were shocked. What kind of power could surpass the flames of a star? Everything in the world was nourished by it to grow. Of course, if one got close, he could also destroy everything. In fact, it was not wrong for them to worship such a technique. Techniques that used the power of yin and yang were known as the Mother Sutra Festival even in the Central Galaxy. It had a special meaning, and many cultivators were researching and pursuing it. Jiang Taichu, I'd like to see how you're going to resist this time. I will definitely kill you. There is no doubt about it. Divine Emperor Lihua's face was cold as steel. His eyes were filled with anger and hatred, but they were brimming with unparalleled confidence. The Fusang divine tree stood tall, supporting the heavens and the earth. It was very powerful, comparable to the Golden Crow ancient emperor's Dharma characteristics that Jiang Tian had encountered in the ancient demon abyss. Resplendent. Blazing. Tyrannical. Flames that contained the power of laws tore apart the firmament and collapsed the void. They seemed to be able to refine the stars and shatter the moon as they came crashing down on Jiang Tian. There were also 9 golden crows that accelerated rapidly, turning into flaming arrows that pierced towards Jiang Tian. Perhaps Divine Emperor Lihua's Sun Sutra had gained a lot of inspiration from the Golden Crow ancient emperor's technique. After all, the Golden Crow ancient emperor's lineage was the guardian of the sun. They lived on a star and were very heaven-defying. Idiot! Jiang Tian only snorted softly. He used the same move again, charging forward. He used his powerful body to break through many phenomenons, sending the golden crows flying and breaking the Fusang divine tree. Under the incredulous gaze of the crowd and Divine Emperor Lihua's exclamation, Jiang Tian instantly rushed above Divine Emperor Lihua and slammed down with his palm. Bam! The palm landed on Divine Emperor Lihua's head. There was no spiritual power or quintessential essence. It was purely physical strength, but it tore through the void, causing Yuan Qi to fluctuate. Pa! Half of Divine Emperor Lihua's head exploded. The ancient bronze chariot fell to the ground. No, to be precise, it was like a cannonball that was shot towards the ground. Together with Divine Emperor Lihua, they blasted a huge pit hundreds of meters deep in the ground. Huge cracks spread out in all directions. The ancient bronze chariot fell apart instantly. Countless Tao patterns and array patterns were destroyed, turning it into a pile of scrap metal. As for Divine Emperor Lihua, he vomited blood. His divine treasures trembled, and his god wailed mournfully. He could not get up for a long time. Jiang Tian had actually used his physical body to severely injure his deity with a single palm strike. This time, everyone was dumbfounded. They could not believe it. The sect masters of the grotto heavens all trembled. Their faces were full of horror. Especially the descendants of the royal family and nobles. They looked as if they had lost their parents. Their faces were pale and dejected. When Jiang Tian had shattered the emperor's fiery tribulation saber and destroyed one of Divine Emperor Lihua's limbs, some of the cultivators were still delusional or comforting themselves. They thought that Jiang Tian was just lucky and that Divine Emperor Lihua was not cautious or did not use his full strength, etc. But this time, they had no reason to comfort themselves. They had to admit that Jiang Tian was suppressing Divine Emperor Lihua. He had completely occupied the upper hand. No. Kang Teichu, you are no match for me. However, after only 3 seconds, Divine Emperor Lihua used the heavenly art of He to repair his body. He roared to the sky and turned into a flame, shooting into the sky. He stood face to face with Jiang Tian. His face was full of humiliation, resentment, and hatred. He took out a magic treasure. When this magic treasure appeared, everyone was shocked. I can't believe this treasure has appeared. How can Kang Tae-chu resist it? Many sect masters of the grotto heavens in the ruins of immortality narrowed their eyes. They looked hopeful and excited. Chapter 1602. Furnace of Myriad Tao. Even the sect masters of the grotto heavens spat out the words with great difficulty. They were so shocked that their eyes almost popped out. Divine Emperor Lai Hua took out an ancient bronze cauldron. The cauldron instantly became 1,000 feet wide, with 3 legs and 2 handles. It was simple and majestic, carved with many inexplicable patterns, such as the sun, moon, stars, flowers, birds, insects, fish, birds, beasts, and even mountains and palaces in the ruins of immortality. Isn't this an ordinary cauldron weapon? Song Baoxin was puzzled. He didn't know why so many sect masters of the grotto heavens were so shocked. No. This is the furnace of myriad Tao. After the headmaster created the Dian law, he led many soul formation grand cultivators to cut off countless laws and great Taoists to create this supreme Taoist artifact. The Academy's Grand Chancellor, Ban Shan, stared at the ancient cauldron with sparkling eyes. He wished he could take it for himself. One had to know that he was one of the top blacksmiths in the ruins of immortality. Even so, this treasure still made his heart burn with desire. So it's that treasure. The headmaster made it himself. Song Baoxin, Chen Aojuan, Su Changqing, and other disciples of the academy were full of admiration, fascination, and shock, as if they were seeing the headmaster. If the headmaster hadn't been born, the ruins of immortality would have been like a long night. The headmaster was a magnificent and open-minded person. He was a saint that appeared once every 5,000 years in the ruins of immortality. When it came to selecting talents and training disciples, the headmaster was open-minded and accepted all kinds of people. He adhered to the idea that everyone could be a talent without discrimination. He brought out countless talents from the 2nd and 3rd level dimensions or the bottom level of the ruins of immortality. In terms of Taoism, the headmaster created the Dian law, which was an unparalleled divine power. With this cultivation method, cultivators could theoretically control several, dozens, or even hundreds of laws, and their strength would reach the limit. Legend had it that after the headmaster created this cultivation method, he traveled the famous mountains and rivers of the ruins of immortality for 1,000 years. He observed the vicissitudes of life and tasted the smoke and fire of the mortal world. With great Dharma power and divine power, he finally cut off countless great Taoists from the ruins of immortality and merged them into the furnace of myriad Tao. It could be said that this bronze cauldron was the crystallization of the headmaster's 1,000 years of cultivation. It was also the most remarkable achievement of the Dian Dao law. As soon as this cauldron appeared, it was like a key that opened the door to all mysteries. Countless great Taoists in the ruins of immortality were immediately activated. Even if it was only a part of it, it was still shocking enough. One had to know that the power of a vast cultivation star was simply immeasurable. No matter how strong the soul formation cultivators in the ruins of immortality were, they could not surpass the world of the ruins of immortality. Moreover, this world had given birth to more than thousands of soul formation cultivators. Suppress. The moment the Inferno God King took out this treasure, his aura increased by 100 times. His body was surrounded by flames and his eyes emitted a bright light. It was as if a real god had descended to the mortal world, overlooking the myriad worlds. His aura was extremely powerful. The 10,000 Tao furnace cauldron rushed towards Jiang Tian. In an instant, the entire ruins of immortality seemed to have awakened. All kinds of essence qi surged towards the cauldron and were mobilized, turning into laws. The spiritual qi of plants, the essence of the scorching sun, the faint light of the stars, the faint light of the stars, and even the death qi of the corpses and the miasma of the swamp all poured down. The Inferno God King was forced to retreat. Unable to bear it, he finally used this peerless Taoist treasure to launch an extreme attack. This was the crystallization of the headmaster's cultivation for half of his life. It was 10 times or even 100 times more powerful than the fruit of Tao of an ordinary soul formation cultivator. Its divine power was terrifying and nothing could resist it. Once it was used, it would definitely shake the world. In the ruins of immortality, which was millions of miles wide, all the spiritual bodies and forces were transformed into laws. They formed invisible lines that traversed the void. There were so many forces and primordial chi in this world. If they were all summoned and turned into attacks, there would be more than 10,000 of them. Instantly, Jiang Tian's surroundings were filled with dense nets, fragments, and ribbons of various colors. 10,000 spirits transformed into the Tao, enveloping over like many huge nets, covering the sky and earth. It made Jiang Tian feel as if he was placed in a furnace and would be refined. My lord, be careful. At this time, even the Green Dragon King, Tu Fei, and Niu Duo Tian were frightened. Tian Shu was so scared that his wine turned into cold sweat and his legs trembled. Bai Muxue made a series of hand seals, trying to break the attack of this Dharma treasure, but she found that it was impossible. This was probably the most invincible art of slaughter beneath the old ruins emperor and the three unparalleled heavyweights. It transformed everything in the world into Tao laws and used the myriad Tao cauldron as a medium to become one with this world, borrowing all the power and laws of this world for my use. Slash! Jiang Tian shouted and waved his fingers. 100-meter-long sword formed by the gunmetal divine law slashed on the giant nets of laws. Bang! That sound was like a blunt knife cutting into cowhide. Everyone thought that the peak attack of the two would be like a meteorite crashing into a continent. Unexpectedly, there wasn't much of a commotion. In the next moment, the gunmetal divine law sword dispersed and turned into golden sage runes. At this time, the 10,000 Tao furnaces attack was like a giant net, but it was still a net with many gaps. Many gunmetal divine law runes flowed out of the holes in the net like a flood and then condensed into a sword dozens of miles away, slashing toward the divine emperor Lai Hua. Seeing this, the divine emperor Lai Hua's face was as cold as steel, and his cold eyes showed some admiration. You would rather sacrifice 1,000 of your own to injure 800 of your enemy. As expected of a hero of a generation. Although he praised, his movements were not slow at all. He used the Xing heavenly technique and flew up and down like a meteor to dodge the sword. TSK. 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 Blood dyed the sky red as the gunmetal divine law sword beheaded a few royals before the sword stopped. The group of royals who were originally arrogant were scared out of their wits and fled like frightened birds, not daring to get close. Kang Te Chu, how dare you bully my juniors? Seeing this, the divine emperor Lai Hua was enraged and roared loudly. Kang Te Chu was too ruthless and could be called the god of death. The royals who had just died were all outstanding and many of them were nascent soul realm cultivators. Why didn't you run and let me kill you? I'm not interested in these small fries. After all, I used my divine power. How can I leave empty-handed? Jiang Tian said coldly as if ignoring the 10,000 Tao net that was about to form. He clenched his fist and shouted. Slash again. A void crack dozens of miles long appeared between heaven and earth, and countless essence chi shot into the sky like smoke signals. The gunmetal divine law sword formed again, and it was dozens of meters long. Obviously, the gunmetal divine law sword had used up a lot of Jiang Tian's divine power. Under the pursuit of the gunmetal divine law sword, the divine emperor Lai Hua fled pathetically and even had to break the void crack to escape. He could feel the terror of the flashing golden Dharma. Its power was no less than ordinary great Tao and could severely injure him. Third slash. Fourth slash. Fifth slash. Jiang Tian launched tens of sword attacks in a row, puncturing countless holes in the cave that had a radius of hundreds, even thousands of miles. The cave was like a hornet's nest, and cracks were everywhere. The Inferno Godly Emperor used the attainment formula and became the fierce running formula. He escaped from the Gungjin long sword dozens of times by a hair's breadth, but his divine treasures were still severely damaged twice. Just as his energy was getting weaker and weaker and he was only a few attacks away from being killed, the Divine Emperor Lai Hua suddenly stopped. Divine Emperor Lai Hua suddenly stood still and stopped dodging. He used the swordsman formula to repair his body and divine treasures while laughing. Kang Tae-chu wanted to kill me before the furnace of myriad Tao closed, but now, hearing this, many soul formation grand cultivators scanned with their immortal will or opened their heavenly eyes to observe carefully. They were shocked to see, tens of thousands of law threads formed a giant net that had already completely closed. It was like a birdcage, and Jiang Tian was a bird in this birdcage. In other words, the furnace of myriad Tao was a large furnace and Jiang Tian was the only firewood in the furnace. Gather! The divine Emperor Lai Hua shouted as he was pleased to get his revenge. Thousands of great Daos rumbled and trembled. They shrank inward, and the multicolored laws became more and more powerful. The sect masters of the grotto heavens, the masters of the families and the living fossils at the soul formation realm all felt that once the giant net closed into the furnace, whether it was the nine heavens deity or the divine fetus of the saints, they would be melted into pieces in an instant. Chapter 1603. This cauldron was the crystallization of the headmaster's 1,000-year-old Tao fruit. It was also the trump card of the divine Emperor Lai Hua. It could even be said that this cauldron was not prepared for Jiang Tian at all, but for the peerless powerhouse from the extraterritorial region. But now, Jiang Tian had become the biggest threat to the empire of the ruins of immortality. The divine Emperor Lai Hua did not disgrace the name of the cauldron by using it now. Alas! Facing the giant net that was gradually compressing and trembling with all kinds of Dharma laws, Jiang Tian let out a soft sigh and dispersed the Gengjin divine rule sword that had been condensed in midair. The divine rule talisman seemed to be cast in gold. It clanged and fell like the fragments of fireworks. Jiang Tian's hands hung down. He stood in the void with his black robe fluttering in the wind. It seemed that he had no choice but to give up resistance. Kang Tae-chu, you are indeed the most talented cultivator in the history of the ruins of immortality. Even the ancient sages from 10,000 years ago might not be as talented as you. At your age, they can't even be compared to you. The divine Emperor Lai Hua praised, but his face was extremely cold. His blazing eyes were full of murderous intent. He made a series of gestures with both hands to activate the great cauldron. With the help of the cauldron, he activated the power of half of the ruins of immortality and crazily attacked Jiang Tian without any mercy. At his level of cultivation, he'd experienced the internal strife of the imperial family, and there were no battles of life and death. He'd galloped through the battlefield, so his disposition was extremely experienced and ruthless. He naturally understood the principle that a lion had to use its full strength even when hunting a rabbit, so how could he allow himself to be merciful in the slightest? What a pity! If we wait another 100 years, the divine Emperor Lai Hua will definitely lose. Divine Emperor Sun Shao shook his head and sighed. Once Kang Tae-chu's soul is searched, the Water Moon heavenly abode will immediately disband and the disciples will be dismissed. Divine Emperor Xian Nu was already thinking of a way out. If Jiang Tian was defeated, and the alliance between the Water Moon heavenly abode and Jiang Tian was exposed, the empire of the ruins of immortality would definitely take revenge and purge. That would be a disaster. Alas, could it be that this kid doesn't know that our ruins of immortality is a place where all rivers flow into the sea? If he surrenders, he can at least be a divine general. Some heavenly grotto heavens headmasters didn't understand and shook their heads regretfully. The sect masters of the grotto heavens, the lords of the aristocratic families, and even the nobles and officials felt regretful. Kang Tae-chu's talent was peerless, so why did he have to become enemies with the ruins of immortality? Wouldn't it have been better for him to just be a servant? Kang Tae-chu is about to die. There should be a lot of treasures in that Zwang peak. Song Baoxin rubbed his palms together, revealing a greedy expression. What? I can't break it. This is too scary. Niu Duotian, the Green Flood Dragon King, Tu Fei, Yun Zhongzi, and the other bandits rushed towards the net and launched attacks in an attempt to save Jiang Tian. However, no matter what method they used, it was useless. They were even shaken out by the dense laws and were sent flying dozens of miles away, suffering heavy injuries. In an instant, the group of heroes' eyes were filled with worry and despair. They felt a chill from head to toe. The Great Cauldron of Myriad Tao affected the laws and Great Tao of the ruins of immortality, which was equivalent to gathering the power of this world. It was so terrifying that it was almost strange. Who could resist using an entire world to suppress it? My lord. Seeing that the huge net had already closed, and it was like a multicolored crystalline cocoon that surrounded Jiang Tian within it, Jiang Tian's heart trembled. Long Xingnan and Bai Muxue both cried out in shock. Tears rolled down their faces, and their hair flew in the wind. Their beautiful faces were pale, filled with despair and sorrow. No! Heishui Fu and his brother roared at the sky. They flapped their wings and attacked the space with sound waves, trying to blast open the cocoon. However, they were sent flying by the backlash of the laws. Blood spurted from their mouths, and their eyes were filled with anxiety and despair. How could this be? Yi Chun and Ing Long looked into the distance and roared out loud. They were extremely distressed and hateful. Ha 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 ha. This is the unparalleled majesty and deep foundation of the ruins of Immortality Imperial Court. Kang Te Chu, no matter how strong you are, you're just a lowly person from a remote and desolate planet. Many members of the royal family laughed wildly. They were incomparably happy and carefree. They were at the top of the pyramid of this world and had vested interests. However, Jiang Tian wanted to wipe out everything, which made them tremble in fear. Now that Jiang Tian was about to die, they were incomparably happy. Their greatest threat had been removed. Terrifying. Many grotto heavens, masters of aristocratic families, and important figures such as the nobles and officials were all shocked. The power of this treasure was too great. Any expert or monster could deal with it. They would forever live under the pressure of this treasure and be shrouded in its shadow. It suppressed people with the power of heaven and earth and refined them with thousands of great Tao as a cauldron. Who could resist it? Only loyalty and submission. At this time, the giant net had already turned into a giant cocoon and then evolved into the shape of a cauldron. It was exactly the same as the Great Cauldron of Myriad Tao. It was like a replica, but it was much larger and was completely condensed of great Tao and laws. This Great Cauldron of Myriad Tao was the final way of killing. The bronze cauldron that Divine Emperor Laihua had used before was just a primer to activate the divine power and activate the laws and great Tao. It was like a key. At this time, the cauldron was very condensed and tightly sealed. Jiang Tian could no longer be seen inside. Countless laws and great Tao turned into ice, fire, wood thorns, mountains. They crazily attacked Jiang Tian. Divine Emperor Laihua is unparalleled. His divine power is unparalleled. His divine power can shock heaven and earth. Who in the world can stop him? The Divine Emperor is indeed a heavenly talent. He is the Emperor of all ages. He looks down on the world and his power has shaken the ages. Kang Te Chu is just a clown. He can't even withstand a single blow. Now that he has fallen to such a state, he deserves it. Many grotto heavens, masters of aristocratic families, and nobles of the royal family were promoting and flattering him with their divine senses. The Divine Emperor Laihua's eyes were arrogant. Suddenly, he felt sad and 2 lines of tears flowed down his face. He said in a trembling voice, "Children, I have avenged you," but at this moment, Jiang Tian's mocking laughter suddenly came from the Great Cauldron of Myriad Tao. Divine Emperor Laihua, is this your method? Everyone looked over in horror. They saw a pair of sparkling palms, which seemed to be filled with chaotic aura, suddenly piercing out of the Great Cauldron of Myriad Tao. Then, both hands grabbed the edge and gently parted. Rumble. Thousands of laws boiled and the great Tao shook. At this moment, the entire ruins of immortality was affected. It was roaring and wailing. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled for 90,000 feet. The wind and clouds surged for 100,000 miles. It was like an injured beast roaring crazily. Crack. The Great Cauldron of Myriad Tao was torn open by Jiang Tian's hands. In this pair of hands, the incomparably tough laws and powerful great Tao were as fragile as paper. Under the horrified gaze of the divine Emperor Lihua, Jiang Tian put his hands behind his back and stepped out of the great cauldron of myriad Tao. He didn't use any spiritual energy, just his physical body alone. He stood in the void in a very natural manner, as if the heavens and earth had become his servants, supporting him. It was as if the myriad of Taos had become his subjects, listening to his orders. This was the majesty of the divine body of chaos. Like the Son of God, the divine Emperor Lihua was very strong. Whether it was his physical body, true essence, divine treasure, or deity, they were all powerful. He could control the laws of fire as if they were his arms. This great cauldron of myriad Tao was the embodiment of the great Tao law. Even a cultivator at the peak of the soul formation realm would be easily crushed to pieces. Unfortunately, he met Jiang Tian, the Jiang Tian who had cultivated the divine body of chaos. The divine body of chaos was the body of a deity, and the body of the strongest deity, the body of a creator deity. Although Jiang Tian's divine body was only at the initial level, which was equivalent to a deity's baby, it was comparable to many deity and saint bodies at the phenomenal level. The great cauldron of myriad Tao used by the divine Emperor Lihua could melt everything and even kill a soul formation realm cultivator. However, it couldn't withstand a single blow from Jiang Tian. This was Jiang Tian's trump card that allowed him to look down upon the ruins of immortality. It could be said that without a divine or deity soul formation realm cultivator, ordinary soul formation realm cultivators in the ruins of immortality would not be able to kill Jiang Tian. He was like a true god, possessing an undying body, impervious to all techniques, and fearless in the face of all Taos. Even if the headmaster was here, Jiang Tian would dare to compete with him with his powerful physical body. This is impossible. The divine Emperor Lihua's face was full of fear and disbelief. Chapter 1604. This was a peerless Taoist treasure that could even kill a peak soul formation cultivator. It was the essence of the headmaster's 1,000-year-old Taoist fruit. Even the three magnates had to be cautious when facing this treasure. But now, it was torn apart by Jiang Tian like a piece of paper. And it was torn apart by his physical body. What was Jiang Tian's body made of? Was it the legendary saintly body and divine fetus? Not only him, but many grotto heavens and masters of aristocratic families also stared with their eyes almost popping out. If this guy wants to attack me today, I definitely won't be able to withstand 3 moves. Ban Shan was so scared that the corners of his eyes trembled crazily and his hair stood on end. His body tilted and he almost fell from the sky. It had only been a few months since they parted in the steel forest, but Jiang Tian's strength had increased by more than 100 times. What should we do? Should we attack together? Hai Zi's face also turned pale. A chill ran down his spine and rushed to the top of his head. He felt a great threat. He and Ban Shan had tried to kill Jiang Tian and knew that with Jiang Tian's vengeful personality, once he was free, he would definitely take revenge. Run now. Divine Emperor Lihua was indeed a peerless divine emperor who had shocked the ruins of immortality for thousands of years. Seeing that the situation was not good, he immediately used the walk formula to break through the void and escape. He had to kill Jiang Tian. That was right. But unnecessary sacrifices were completely unnecessary. Now, even if he tried his best, he couldn't hurt Jiang Tian. In that case, it was better to avoid him and save his strength. The divine treasures of divine Emperor Lihua roared and used the walk formula. Wind, fire, and thunder appeared under his feet. The vertical eye on his forehead spewed out flames and broke through the space. His whole body was like a flame of heaven, burning the road ahead and escaping to the north at lightning speed. This punch is to avenge my brothers, and to repay you for 3 months of crazy hunting and killing. Jiang Tian's eyes flashed coldly. He stepped on the void with his right foot and the void cracked. With the counterforce of the void, Jiang Tian broke through the battle formations one after another like a human-shaped cannonball. Crystal warships and nascent soul stage cultivators were immediately shattered by him. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Tian had crossed 100 miles and arrived behind the Inferno God King. This scene stunned everyone. At this moment, the Inferno Godly Emperor used the Path character art and also used the Sun Sutra to burn open the void. His speed could at least be ranked in the top 10 of the ruins of immortality. He was the best in the universe. However, Jiang Tian had surpassed the Inferno Godly Emperor just by relying on his physical strength. This was like a fantasy story. The next moment, Jiang Tian clenched his fist and punched out. Clang! With this punch, the entire world was instantly thrown into chaos. The sun and moon hung upside down, and it was as if the world was about to collapse. No! The Inferno Godly Emperor suddenly turned around, his eyes filled with extreme fear. He let out a cry of surprise and waved his hands like he was paddling water, triggering countless great paths of heavenly fire to block in front of him like a giant flame shield. However, Jiang Tian's punch was too fast, almost at the speed of light. It had completely exceeded the Inferno Godly Emperor's reaction speed. He hadn't fully activated his laws, and he hadn't even had time to form a domain. Jiang Tian's jade-white fist shattered the void wherever it passed. The fist passed through the Inferno Godly Emperor's hands and easily broke through the half-formed laws of fire as if they were brittle paper. The fist landed on the Inferno Godly Emperor's chest. Pfft! A big hole was blasted in the Inferno Godly Emperor's chest. He spat out blood and screamed into the sky. The blood was in the state of flames, lingering in the void and burning fiercely. If one looked through it, they would find that the blood was completely composed of runes of the laws of fire. In fact, the Inferno Godly Emperor had already surpassed Vitality Life and reached the level of Law Life. He was indestructible, but he was still beaten to the point of vomiting blood by Jiang Tian. No! This emperor's might has suppressed the ancient times. How could someone with heavenly talent fall? How can I die in the hands of a nobody? The Inferno Godly Emperor yelled, unwilling to accept such a tragic reality. He activated the swordsman formula crazily to repair his body. Let's see how you're going to repair it. Jiang Tian sneered. The nascent soul in the spirit embryo roared and activated the Soul Devourer's immortal will, shooting it out like an arrow. Whoosh! The Soul Devourer's immortal will shot out like a bolt of lightning and shot into the mind of the Inferno Godly Emperor. The Soul Devourer's immortal will was ferocious. It instantly smashed the divine soul of the Inferno Godly Emperor. His body immediately stiffened and the wound showed no signs of healing. In fact, from the perspective of mortals, once the divine soul was destroyed, the person would be dead even if the body hadn't rotted. However, soul formation grand cultivators were powerful because they had a god. A nascent soul was the combination of essence, chi, and spirit. It had self-consciousness and was like a second life. It could be reborn and rebuild a body. A god was 10 times or 100 times more powerful than a nascent soul. If a nascent soul was a weak baby, a god would be a strong young man. As long as a god was immortal, he could be reborn from a drop of blood. Of course, his life wouldn't end. Roar! The god inside the body of the Inferno Godly Emperor yelled and there was endless determination and hatred in his eyes. The next moment, the god stepped into the air and was about to leave the divine treasure as if he were opening a door. This god seemed to break out of his body and grew bigger with the wind. He was just like the Inferno Divine Emperor in his youth. His features were similar, but he was also a little childish. The Dharma power, divine powers, blood chi, and true essence of that god were 70 to 80% of the Inferno Godly Emperor at his peak. Apparently, a god was even more terrifying than a body and a divine soul. Go to hell. Without saying a word, Jiang Tian did not show any mercy and threw out a backhand palm strike. Boom! As Jiang Tian slapped, the air in a few 100-mile radius was turned into a thin layer, as if the three-dimensional world had become a piece of paper. The clouds, mountains, cultivators, battleships and Dharma artifacts, and even the god and body of the Inferno Godly Emperor were all turned into a flat surface in an instant. No! In the end, the god spread out to 100-meter radius, almost like a thin piece of paper. The remnant soul of the god came out and yelled, trying to break free. But then, it found that the space had been locked and was still being compressed. Then, the remnant soul was also broken. That was the power of the chaotic divine body. Even without using any Dharma power, it was enough to kill a normal soul formation cultivator. It was a piece of cake. At this moment, the flesh and blood of the Inferno Celestial Emperor, as well as the essence, chi, and spirit of the god, were all spread out like a red membrane. It was very thin, like a red sunset, hazy and translucent like a veil. Boom! Boom! The aftermath of the slap didn't stop. Within a few 100-mile radius, all the members of the royal family and their crystal chariots and battleships were turned into thin pieces, like little mice that had been hit by a heavy hammer. Nothing was left, and everything was turned into ashes. At the same time, in a royal temple in the ruins of immortality, a statue that was enjoying the worship of incense suddenly opened its eyes, revealing a look of horror. It wanted to roar, but it was already too late. The statue directly exploded and was annihilated inch by inch, as if it had been crushed by an invisible hand. Not a trace of it was left. Ah! How did the statue break? The guardian cultivators around him were terrified. This statue was where the Inferno Godly Emperor's primordial spirit rested. If the real body died, it could be reborn. But now, it was broken. In the back mountain of the academy, in a huge cultivation bottle in the courtyard of Grand Chancellor Xianhu, a young Inferno Godly Emperor also exploded. All kinds of organs flew in all directions, splashing red and yellow liquid on Xianhu's face. Not only that, but in various secret places in the ruins of immortality, even in some blessed lands in the second-level and third-level worlds such as Hylon, Barbarian, Desert, and even in an unknown folded cave. Almost at the same time, dozens of statues of the Inferno Godly Emperor collapsed, and hundreds of his avatars all exploded and died. Jiang Tian's slap not only killed the real body of the Inferno Godly Emperor, but also killed all his primordial spirit, thoughts, and living things in the ruins of immortality. A godly emperor, in the true sense of the word, had fallen. This was the power of the chaotic divine body. At this moment, all the cultivators in the ruins of immortality who had seen or sensed all of this were shocked. From a small character like Song Baoxin to the big shot level strong practitioners like Chancellor Ban Shan and the sect masters of the various large grotto heavens, they only felt like ants facing a true god. They were so insignificant and powerless, so weak like ants. It was as if the stars couldn't withstand a single blow from Jiang Tian. At this moment, whether they saw it with their own eyes or through the light screen, the billions of cultivators in the ruins of immortality were silent at the same time. The entire ruins of immortality was silent to the extreme. Only Jiang Tian stood proudly in the sky above the Xiantian mountain range that had almost been razed to the ground. His long robe and black hair fluttered in the wind. His eyes were shining, as if he were the immortal king of the 9 heavens, unshakable and invincible. Chapter 1605. Divine Emperor Inferno, who had dominated the ruins of immortality for thousands of years, was dead. None of the spectators dared believe it. Even the heroes of the great bandits were deeply shocked, unable to recover from their shock. Divine Emperor Inferno's final myriad Tao cauldron was so powerful that even a late-stage soul formation great divine lord might not be able to withstand it. However, Jiang Tian had broken through all Dharma with his physical body and suppressed all Taos with one palm, easily destroying his physical body, deity, and countless divine souls. Didn't that mean that Jiang Tian's strength had already surpassed soul formation? How is this possible? He was clearly using laws, and he has a nascent soul in his body, not a deity. That thought surfaced in many people's minds, but they found it unbelievable and incredulous. But the truth was the truth. The scene before his eyes clearly proved that all of this was real. Jiang Tian had the strength to take on veteran soul formation cultivators or late-stage soul formation cultivators. Now, perhaps only the 3 powerhouses, Teacher, Sword God, and Star Lord, have the ability to suppress him. Upon realizing this, many members of the royal family turned pale, as though they were grieving for their parents. It could be said that although Divine Emperor Inferno was not the strongest among the 10 Divine Emperors, he was at least in the top 3. After all, he was a direct Divine Emperor. As for the other 2 direct Divine Emperors, they were on the same order of magnitude as him. It could be said that the Ruins Emperor's palace no longer had many trump cards that could match Jiang Tian. They could only ask for help from a peerless powerhouse. Roar! Divine Emperor Inferno is no match. He can't withstand a single blow. He's no match for our celestial arch. Fu Heishui cheered. This Lai Hua is a silly roe deer. Fu Huiren shook his head and sighed, gloating. He gave his daughter to us and became our father-in-law. Our celestial arch is also a benevolent person. He will probably spare his life. His Majesty Grand Primordium's breakthrough has made him so powerful. That palm strike had the power to destroy the world. Green Drake King, Yun Zhongzi, Niu Duo Tian, and the other great bandits exchanged looks. They were shocked and could not remain calm. Perhaps, His Majesty Grand Primordium already has the qualifications to compete with the 3 powerhouses, or even the Ruins Emperor. Tu Fei's eyes sparkled as he clenched his fists in excitement. They knew that after Jiang Tian's breakthrough this time, he would definitely ascend to the limit, but they didn't think that Jiang Tian would be so powerful. He didn't use any mana or abhijna in actual combat. Instead, he used his powerful physical body to smash the Inferno Godly Emperor into pieces. The key point was that the Inferno Godly Emperor had used the Great Tao Cauldron. This was too heaven-defying. What? The Inferno Godly Emperor was actually killed? In the army of Academy disciples, Song Baoxin was completely dumbfounded. The other disciples were all shocked and terrified. Kang Taichu was very strong, but in their eyes, in front of the Inferno Xinhuang, he was like an ant, unable to withstand a single blow. Therefore, they watched this battle as if it was an outing. Their mentality was very relaxed. Who would have thought that it would end up like this? Not to mention the small fries, even Ban Shan, Black and White Suns and the sect masters of the Grotto Heavens were terrified. Jiang Tian's palm smashed the air and turned three-dimensional into a flat surface. Even the Inferno Godly Emperor was killed. It was too terrifying. When I was cultivating in seclusion, you all attacked the generals of the new heavenly courts. Shouldn't we settle this score? Jiang Tian took the essence Qi and Dharma treasure fragments of the Inferno Godly Emperor into the sky-swallowing demonic gourd. Then, he glanced at the Grand Cultivators calmly. His voice was neither warm nor angry, but it was shocking, as if it came from the vast 9 heavens. Is it really time to settle the score? Is it starting so soon? Hearing this, everyone shuddered. Their hairs stood on end as chills ran down their spines from head to toe. They all knew that Jiang Tian was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Back then, before his power had increased, he had tried his best to kill the sword servant Tong Yujian. But then, his power had soared and he already had the power to defeat soul formation cultivators. How could he let those people go so easily? At this moment, many people trembled and thought of running away, but they immediately denied that idea. Jiang Tian didn't even need to use Dharma power. He was faster than the Inferno Godly Emperor with his body. Who could run away from him? Now, whoever ran first would be the first to stick their neck out, and would instead be killed by Jiang Tian. Of course, among them, Ban Shan and Black and White Suns were the most terrified. They were different from the other forces that dealt with Jiang Tian's subordinates. Those two had worked together with Tong Yujian to kill Jiang Tian back then. Jiang Tian said that there would be bloody revenge back then. However, I, Kang Taichu, am not a cruel person. Jiang Tian softened his tone and whispered. What I did was to take back the great rivers and mountains that belong to the deity land. I don't want to see innocent people trapped in the fire and water. As long as you're willing to surrender to me and fight against the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality to atone for your crimes, I can spare your lives." As soon as he said that, the entire place fell silent. Everyone sank into deep thought, fighting an intense battle of thoughts. Many people were hesitant. They certainly knew that Jiang Tian was powerful, but the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality still had a lot of trump cards. In addition to the three giants, there were hundreds of thousands of cultivators, crystal warships, countless arrays and dharma artifacts. Even if Jiang Tian had the combat power of a late-stage soul formation cultivator, such a huge army could still wear him down. "Kang Te-chu, don't be so arrogant. Even if you killed the Inferno Godly Emperor, you're no match for the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality." One of the princes stepped out from the crowd and shouted, "Don't worry. Surrender. We can forget about the past and rule with you. This is your only chance." This prince was wearing a golden python robe and a golden crown on his head. His face was like jade, and he was very handsome. He looked elegant and graceful, and there was a hint of sharpness in his aura. Prince Chiu Ming. Long Shenan's face darkened and her eyes were filled with hatred. Prince Chiu Ming was one of the four princes and one of the disciples of the Sword God. He was in charge of the 9 guards of the Emperor of the Ruins Palace. His talent was extraordinary, his cultivation was powerful, and his battle achievements were illustrious. Before, in the Ruins of Immortality, he was a high and mighty figure, shining like a star in the sky. Even Qing Aojuan, Su Changqing, and the other heaven's favorites on the God of War list idolized him. In the past few years, he had always been the vanguard of the operations against Jiang Tian. He was even the chief commander in the early stages. He didn't give up command until the situation got out of hand. This time, he followed Divine Emperor Lai Hua to gain experience. Just now, he cheered for Divine Emperor Lai Hua in the crowd and jumped very high. The royal family was different from the Grotto Heavens. The royal family was Jiang Tian's mortal enemy. Even if they surrendered, Jiang Tian would definitely not let them off. Furthermore, the souls of the princes were closely connected to the Ruins Emperor's palace. Once they betrayed him, they would immediately be killed by the marriage pursuit art. They would not have the chance to surrender. In a short period of time, Prince Chiu Ming had thought through many things. Instead of being killed by Jiang Tian, he might as well take a gamble and intimidate Jiang Tian. Perhaps that would give him a chance of survival. "Do you think you have the right to negotiate with me? You're just a dog." Jiang Tian laughed mockingly. Jiang Tian was not exaggerating when he said that. Even God King Hanshi was killed. Even God King Lai Hua was killed. In Jiang Tian's eyes, princes and nobles were nothing more than trash. "What did you say?" Prince Chiu Ming was enraged. "How dare you question me? Be prepared to be killed." Jiang Tian's eyes were cold as he pointed with his finger. This time, Jiang Tian used the Kunpeng divine rule. It was still the Nirvana void-splitting saber, but it was more than 10 times stronger than before. Pa! A saber beam flashed across hundreds of miles, and Prince Chiu Ming's head exploded. Blood mist filled the air as an inch-long nascent soul flew out, only to be shredded into pieces by the surging spatial saber beam. A headless corpse fell to the ground. "Let's fight it out with that devil Kang Te-chu. Kang Te-chu, you have killed the innocent and stirred up a storm of blood. You will be punished by the heavens. You will die a horrible death." The princes also knew that they would definitely die today. Therefore, they roared and charged towards Jiang Tian like moths to a flame. They burned their golden cores and even their nascent souls. Their bodies were covered in blood-red flames. They were burning their lifeblood and lifespan. They were going all out. Trash. Jiang Tian did not say another word. He attacked mercilessly with his palm. Bang! 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 The space within a few dozen miles was flattened again. Many of the members of the royal family were at the nascent soul level and some were even at the half-soul formation level. There were more than 100 of them, but they all exploded like firecrackers. They were all crushed by Jiang Tian's palm. Chapter 1606. This scene shocked everyone. It was too bloody and cruel. Under Jiang Tian's attack, many members of the royal family were turned into blood mist. Kang Tae-chu, he's going to fight the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality. Many people realized this. The sect master of the Tianji Grotto Heaven trembled and showed deep fear and shock. Father, did you see that? His Majesty Tai-chu has avenged you. Only Long Xingnan was crying, but there was deep joy deep in her eyes. She looked up at the sky and sighed. It should be known that it was Prince Chiu Ming who had brought the 3 guards down to the lower realm to sweep through the Dragon Clan and exterminate the Dragon Clan. He could be considered the main culprit. How could Long Xingnan not be happy and excited when Prince Chiu Ming was killed? Jiang Tian had certainly risked universal condemnation by killing Divine Emperor Hanshi and Divine Emperor Laihua, but after all, it was a life-and-death battle. It would make sense if the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality wanted to issue an edict. However, Jiang Tian was completely a god of death at this time. He didn't leave any room for negotiation. Even if the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality thought that they should rope in Jiang Tian, they wouldn't do it anymore. Because Jiang Tian's attitude was to fight to the death. He was invincible and showed no mercy. Besides, the sect masters of the Grotto Heavens, the lords of the families and the kings also knew that Jiang Tian's action was also a declaration. He had even slaughtered the royal family of the Ruins of Immortality, so what was the difference between the other forces? If they didn't surrender, he would really kill them. My friends, what can we do? The sect master of the Tianmeng Grotto Heaven had white hair and a white beard. He was extremely depressed and said with his immortal will. Kang Tae-chu is very powerful. He didn't use any Dharma laws or divine powers from the beginning to the end. He killed Divine Emperor Hanshi with only his physical strength. I'm afraid that we might not be able to resist such a terrifying power even if we work together. He was already 8,000 years old. He had experienced the war between the South Gate and the cultivators of the deity ground during the Age of Tao damage. His seniority was even higher than that of the Inferno Divine Emperor. Although he was not a member of the royal family, his cultivation was as deep as the ocean. He was about the same level as the Inferno Godly Emperor, and his combat experience was very rich. Is his body invincible? The dozens of soul formation cultivators frowned. In fact, Jiang Tian defeating the Inferno Godly Emperor was shocking, but it was nothing. The Inferno Divine Emperor was certainly more powerful than them, but since they were all soul formation grand cultivators, he was only slightly more powerful. However, Jiang Tian's punch that blew up the Inferno Divine Emperor made everyone's hair stand on end. In the entire Ruins of Immortality, there was probably no second person who could kill the Inferno Divine Emperor so easily. Even if everyone present were to join hands, it would still be difficult for them to do so. The strength of this body might be unmatched in the immortal ruins. Even Ban Shan couldn't help but admit this. His heart was heavy. The next one will be the 2 of us. Black and White looked at Ban Shan meaningfully with a deep gaze. In fact, all the soul formation grand cultivators had realized this. They were extremely nervous and their minds were in turmoil. Small fries like Song Baoxin and Qing Aojuan might still have a chance to take advantage of the chaos and escape. However, the sect masters of these Grotto Heavens were being stared at by Jiang Tian, so they had to make a statement. Besides, Jiang Tian wouldn't give them too much time. Their lives were in the hands of Jiang Tian. Besiege him from a distance, trap him with secret treasures, block him with arrays, and attack him with supreme Tao artifacts or crystal warships. No matter how strong his body is, he's not invincible. The sect master of the flower-washing cave heaven said softly, but his eyes were as cold as ice, flashing with endless killing intent. If they surrendered to Jiang Tian, the dynasty of the Ruins of Immortality would definitely not let them go. There would be a bloody purge and the chances of them dying were very high. Besides, even if they could escape, what about their descendants? Many of them had signed a soul contract with the dynasty of the Ruins of Immortality. They would have nowhere to run and their divine souls would be destroyed. Of course, the chances of winning against Jiang Tian were slim, but at least there was a chance of survival, especially for their descendants. We don't have any other choice. The sect master of the Tianmeng Grotto Heaven looked at Zhao Shanhe and said with a hint of sorrow. Since the day he embarked on the path of cultivation, he knew that it would be a path filled with bloodshed. Cultivators were strong and had a long lifespan, but killing people for treasures and fighting for cultivation was like licking blood on the edge of a blade. They usually didn't end well. However, he also knew that the higher the level, the lower the probability of dying in a fight. For example, only 1 or 2 soul formation grand cultivators had died in a fierce battle in the Ruins of Immortality in 1,000 years. Therefore, he didn't expect that he would still have to face a life and death choice one day, even though he had already reached the peak of the soul formation realm and stood at the top of this world. More importantly, his son, Zhao Shanhe, might also die with him. Zhao Shanhe was his favorite disciple. Fortunately, he had a long lifespan and many cultivation partners and children, so he had left behind a lot of bloodlines. Father, I understand. Zhao Shanhe's heart was pounding and his body was cold. He trembled slightly. This was an unprecedented sense of crisis. At this moment, he suddenly remembered that when he entered the Qi refinement realm at the age of 10, his father threw him into the barbaric mountains in order to refine him. When he faced a black tiger, he seemed to be torn to pieces at any time. Let's fight. Many sect masters of the Grotto Heavens heard the news and took action. The happiest ones were Ban Shan and Black White. After all, it was dangerous for the two of them to deal with Jiang Tian alone. The chances of winning were extremely slim. But now, more than 10 soul formation realm cultivators were taking action together, so their chances of winning suddenly soared. Kang Te Chu, today, let's fight again. I will wring your head off. Ban Shan had a tall stature, and the muscles all over his body were like coiling dragons. He wielded a huge hammer, and his dusty face was filled with killing intent and ruthlessness. Under the admiring gazes of Song Baoxin, Qing Aojuan and the other disciples, Ban Shan stepped out of the flying ship and approached Jiang Tian. Kang Te Chu, you've killed many people and you've caused a lot of bloodshed. You're the top fiend in the ruins of deity and everyone has the right to kill you. Today, I'll uphold justice and kill the fiend. The black and white chess pieces' auras were indistinct, and their green robes were worn out. They grabbed the chessboard and leaped out, their battle intent rising steadily. Other than Sun Shao and Divine Lord Xian Nu, the sect masters, grand elders, and a few Divine Lord families of the other 5 Grotto Heavens spread out and stood 100 miles away from each other. There were 18 of them, all of whom were soul formation realm cultivators. They either emanated ghastly sword chi, flickered with black light, raging flames that shot into the sky, or were lofty and majestic like a mountain. But every single one of them possessed extraordinary bearings and possessed divine might that emanated peerless pressure. They were brimming with the aura of a superior figure as they stood towering in space. They looked around and faced Jiang Tian. Although they were nervous and cautious, their battle intent was surging. That kind of aura was definitely not a bluff. You couldn't fake it even if you wanted to. That was a battle record that could only be released with the confidence of a powerful divine ability. It could be said that apart from the 3 giants and a few divine emperors, they were the masters of this world, as high and mighty as gods. In the past, they dominated a region and no one was willing to submit to anyone. But now, they were working together to kill Jiang Tian. It could be said that they were creating a new world. It could also be said that no matter what the result of this battle was, that day's battle was enough to be recorded in history. Chapter 1607. As the soul formation grand cultivators stood still, some nascent soul cultivators with powerful immortal wills had already sensed the vast energy in the sky, which belonged to Dharma laws. More than a dozen soul formation divine lords seemed to be scattered, but they seemed to have become one. Those Dharma laws that used to be scattered were twisted into a rope, which immediately became 10 times more tenacious and powerful. An invisible battle array had been established in the sky. Ah, I've given you a chance, but you don't cherish it. You'll regret your choice today. Jiang Tian stood with his hands behind his back and glanced at everyone coldly. Kang Te-chu, you're indeed powerful. However, how can you cause trouble in the empire of deity? You've stirred up a storm of blood and plunged people into misery and suffering. That's unforgivable. As the Grand Chancellor of the Academy, I must kill you. Ban Shan said righteously. But Long Xingnan and the others saw a glint of fear in Ban Shan's eyes. He was just pretending to be tough at the moment, but he was weak inside. Kang Te-chu, hand over the cultivation arts you've learned. We'll definitely beg for mercy in the Emperor of the Ruins Palace and spare your life. The sect master of the Hua Hua Grotto Heaven said with a deep look, but the greed on his face couldn't be concealed. Right. Greed. The sect masters of the Grotto Heavens and the masters of the families looked greedy right then, like a pack of hungry wolves staring at a piece of fat meat. Even though they were terrified of Jiang Tian's power, they wanted to replace him and have Jiang Tian's power. Jiang Tian was only a nascent soul cultivator, but he had such a powerful body and was able to fight against soul formation cultivators. The cultivation arts he had learned must be extremely advanced. If they could control those cultivation arts, any soul formation cultivator would have the power to compete with the three peerless giants, or even crush them. If that was the case, they wouldn't have to bow to the Emperor of the Ruins, they could establish their own sects and become ancestral patriarchs in the future. Thus, the reason why they attacked Jiang Tian was not only because this battle was unavoidable, but also because they desired to obtain Jiang Tian's inheritance and good fortune. Hand it over. A dozen soul formation cultivators stood in the sky and surrounded Jiang Tian. They shouted at the same time and released endless energy. The two Grand Chancellors of the Academy and the headmasters of the 5 Grotto Heavens, a total of more than 10 divine monarchs released their power together. How terrifying it was. It could be said that such a scene had never appeared in the ruins of immortality before. The void within a radius of 100 miles had almost solidified into a piece of metal. This was the result of the support of multiple domains. Demonic chi, spiritual chi, and vital chi no longer existed, almost collapsing into oblivion. Countless types of power of laws appeared within it. Each and every one of them was extremely dense and could easily crush a nascent soul cultivator into dust. Facing a peerless killing god like Jiang Tian, no one dared to be negligent. Everyone took out their most prized Tao artifact. Rumble. Over 10 peerlessly terrifying auras shot into the sky, and they carried a peerless aura of slaughter. The might that contained the grand Tao fragments caused all the cultivators present to tremble and feel uneasy, and their hearts trembled violently. Only in the hands of a soul formation grand cultivator could the true power of a Dharma artifact and shock the world. You're courting death. Jiang Tian's eyes were cold and emotionless. His murderous intent rose. At first, he only wanted to kill Divine Emperor Lai Hua. After all, many Grotto Heavens and families were only following orders. They had signed a divine soul contract with the Emperor of the Ruins Palace and couldn't disobey at all. They had no choice. But then, the greed in their eyes completely infuriated Jiang Tian. Very well. Since all of you insist on seeking death, I shall grant your wish today. From today onwards, there will be no more 6 Grotto Heavens in the ruins of immortality. Jiang Tian was filled with murderous intent at the moment and a cruel smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He walked forward step by step as if there was a path to heaven. In the eyes of mortals, that scene was magical but not shocking. After all, chi refinement cultivators could fly. But to the soul formation cultivators, they were terrified. Crack. Crack. As Jiang Tian walked forward, layers of domains cracked one after another. The Dharma laws and grand Taos contained were torn apart like pieces of paper, unable to withstand a single blow. The soul formation cultivators were dumbfounded. At that moment, Jiang Tian still didn't use any Dharma laws or divine powers. He still used his body to tear apart the domains that they were proud of. No, to be exact, those domains didn't seem to exist. Duh. Zhao Shanhe behind the divine lords, as well as Song Baoxin, Su Changqing, Cheng Aojuan and the others who were further away, were all trembling. Attack! The sect master of the flower-washing grotto heaven shouted and attacked first. Luoing divine sword. As he shook his sword, the sword flew out and many sword chi dharma laws flew towards Jiang Tian with a whistling sound. The sword chi dharma laws were very magical and beautiful. They were like withered petals, sparkling and translucent. There were so many of them that it looked like a rain of flowers. But if one looked carefully, they would see that the petals were shining with essence chi and were engraved with dharma laws and Tao patterns. Their murderous intent was hidden in the beauty and dreamy, which was deceptive. Normal nascent soul stage cultivators might be intoxicated by it after a single glance. They would give up resisting and fighting and perish. 10,000 soul myriad banner. Du Qianlian. Have a taste of my hammer. Ruins Emperor Bell, as the sect master of the flower-washing grotto heaven attacked, the other overlords also attacked with all their might, hoping to kill their enemy with one strike. Ban Shan and Haihizi looked vicious and their eyes were vicious. They wanted to cut Jiang Tian into pieces to vent their anger. Boom! More than 10 soul formation divine lords attacked at the same time. What did that mean? At that moment, the entire Xiantian mountain range shook violently and the ground was like a rag pulled by a child. The area within a few thousand miles turned into an ocean of violent energy that swept across like a hurricane. It was extremely shocking. Countless dharma laws and energy clashed with each other, transforming, gathering and strengthening each other. They roared crazily and created some haze. The dimension completely collapsed and the dimensional fragments flew around like angry dragons, forming a terrifying storm. Only the dharma laws were still stable. They became even more glittering and dazzling, more condensed and tough. A nascent soul cultivator would have died even if they touched it, not to mention entering it. Even a soul formation cultivator would be crushed to pieces if they entered. The cultivators outside, even if they were peak-stage nascent soul cultivators and had activated many defensive dharma treasures, felt extremely uncomfortable. All of them felt extremely uncomfortable, almost to the point of wanting to die. Song Baoxin held his stomach and vomited without caring about his image. His divine soul had been affected by the energy and his organs had been damaged. As for the golden core cultivators, they could only crawl on the ground and step back. They were already 3,000 miles away and could only observe with their surveillance dharma artifacts. Everyone could only see. Swish, swish, swish. Many peerless Taoist treasures gathered dazzling light or heavy auras. With long tails, they crossed hundreds of miles and crossed the sky to attack Jiang Tian like shooting stars chasing the moon. Every single Tao treasure possessed boundless might. Some pressed down to the point the ground sank, some slashed apart mountain ranges, some emitted furious howls of gale, and it seemed as if they'd opened up an expanse of hell. There were more than a dozen Tao treasures, each with their own strengths. They were peerless and their combined attacks were comparable to the 1,000 Tao cauldron. Even if Divine Emperor Lai Hua came back to life and had an immortal divine body, he wouldn't be able to resist. Master. Senior. At this moment, even the warriors of the great Ko country were shocked. Long Xingnan and Bai Muxiue were even trembling. But Jiang Tian was calm, as if he didn't care about anything. Bang! Jiang Tian waved his sleeve. Under everyone's incredulous gaze, he directly shattered the Luoing divine sword. Numerous sword chi laws in the shape of petals flew out diagonally with tinkling sounds. They were like heavenly maidens scattering flowers as they cut through the ground and pierced through the mountains. Whoosh! At this time, Grand Chancellor Ban Shan's giant hammer also arrived. Golden Taoist connotation spread and dragon-like lightning surrounded it. The essence fire of the sun gushed out and the wind whistled like a hurricane. Clang! Disdain appeared on Jiang Tian's face as he punched out. Clang! The giant hammer, which was strong enough to forge asteroids and break the sky, was shattered by Jiang Tian's fist. Countless tiny pieces shot into the sky. The great Tao of metal, fire and thunder in the world were affected and the sky rumbled. Then, Jiang Tian punched, kicked, slapped and pointed. He attacked 13 times in a row and shattered the 18 Tao treasures. Those Tao artifacts were supreme and almost immortal. They were made with countless precious materials in the ruins of immortality. Even if a star fell and the world was overturned, they might not be destroyed. But then, Jiang Tian easily destroyed them. His fist, which looked like a body of flesh and blood, didn't even cause any damage. Divine body. That was the real divine body. Many soul formation grand cultivators were either affected by the backlash or were shocked. They hadn't come back to their senses. Jiang Tian stepped on the sky and the space 10 miles under his feet became flat again. He had already shot into the sky with the help of the space curvature. He flashed across the world and attacked Ban Shan and the others. Oh no! As soon as the sect master of the flower-washing cave heaven exclaimed, he saw Jiang Tian pass by Grand Chancellor Ban Shan's side like a flickering light. Grand Chancellor Ban Shan's body froze and his eyes were full of shock, unwillingness and fear. A hole appeared in his chest and it quickly expanded. Ban Shan couldn't repair it even if he used 9 kinds of recovery techniques. Jiang Tian's layers of fist energy and the destroyed gods quickly spread to his divine treasures, limbs and entire body like fireworks. The next moment, Grand Chancellor Ban Shan, who was known to have a tough body and the best melee fighter in the ruins of immortality, exploded inch by inch. His body, gods and divine soul all turned into ashes and disappeared in the air, as if they had never appeared. Jiang Tian defeated him with a single strike. Grand Chancellor Ban Shan was dead. Everyone was shocked. The counterattack has begun. Black and white, it's your turn. Jiang Tian laughed softly. His eyes were cold as he turned around like an illusion. He easily traversed 50 kilometers and arrived before Black and White Child. Senior, please show mercy. Junior surrenders. Black and White were terrified, and they staggered back as they cried out pitifully. Chapter 1608. Black and White had always been graceful, elegant, and handsome. He was like an immortal that had descended, like a famous scholar of the Wei and Jin dynasties. But at this moment, under the approach of Jiang Tian, he was panicking like a stray dog and was in an extremely sorry state. But no matter what, Black and White was approaching the Grand Chancellor of the Academy and had been personally taught by the teacher. He had been famous for thousands of years and had rich battle experience, so he wasn't completely defenseless. Whoosh! The black and white ghost stones hovering around Jiang Tian suddenly turned into black and white qi, circling around him like rainbows. The 2 qi circulated continuously, growing endlessly. It was like a taiji diagram that contained the life and death law's great Tao, trying to block Jiang Tian's attack. You're just like an ant. Jiang Tian snorted and punched. Jiang Tian's punch was simple and unadorned. There was no fluctuation of magic power, nor was there any glow or auspicious colors, nor was there any rumbling of the great Tao or laws. There was only power. Pure and powerful power. Nothing could stop him from breaking through everything with brute force. Under this punch, the black and white taiji diagram immediately erupted with brilliant light. The laws within disintegrated, and the fragments of the great Tao turned into powder. Roar! Black and white roared into the sky, and the divine treasures in his body trembled. The gods suffered a strong backlash and split open in an instant. It was too late to retreat again. Crack! Jiang Tian's eyes were cold and emotionless without any ripples. His fist rushed forward violently, piercing through the broken and collapsing yin and yang fish diagram and smashing into black and white's chest. Puff! Black and white spat out blood, and the blood was dazzling. There was already a deep fist print on his chest. With this fist print as the center, the violent force rippled out like ripples and instantly covered his entire body, reaching his divine treasures and limbs. It shook again and again. Pa, pa, pa. Black and White's bones instantly shattered into countless pieces. With a rumble, the divine treasures collapsed, and the god was also shattered. The next moment, he completely turned into sparkling and translucent flesh rain that sprinkled down. Even his spirit was destroyed. Jiang Tian waved his hand and executed the Taotai restoration, swallowing all of Black and White's scattered qi, blood, and spirit, turning them into cultivation resources. Satisfying. Jiang Tian twisted his neck and let out a string of popping sounds that sounded like beans being fried. A cruel and delighted smile appeared on the corners of his mouth, and the depression in his heart was swept away. Ever since Jiang Tian was reborn, even though he had slaughtered unhindered, he was actually very meticulous in his actions. If he wasn't 100% confident, he would definitely not act rashly. In the Steel Forest Forbidden Grounds, he had been surrounded by Black and White Child, Sword Servant Tong Yujian, and Ban Shan, and had almost perished. Of course, he was furious to the extreme. His cultivation had been raised to the limit. Today, he had broken out of seclusion, killed his enemies, and exacted his bloody revenge. Jiang Tian was naturally overjoyed. Grand Chancellor. Senior. How could you die? Chancellor, Lord Chancellor, you have the creation mysterious technique, so you can definitely revive the two seniors, right? Or, if I hand it over to Grand Chancellor Xian Hu, he will definitely be able to revive, right? Many chancellors, instructors, and disciples of the academy even knelt down with a plop, pounding the ground and wailing. Many of them had tears of blood in their eyes. Cheng Aojuan, Su Changqing, Song Baoxin, and the other disciples were so shocked that they couldn't speak. They were full of disbelief. The Grand Chancellor and the direct disciples of the headmaster, Ban Shan and Black and White Child, could be said to be the pillars of the academy. Now that they had been killed by Jiang Tian, it was like a skyscraper collapsing and a heavenly pillar breaking. To the academy, it was an unbearable loss. As for the other cultivators, it was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over their heads. They felt cold from head to toe. Jiang Tian was too powerful. Killing the Grand Chancellor was as easy as killing a chicken. Those were the two Grand Chancellors of the Academy. Their strength was completely on par with the sect masters of the Grotto Heavens, and they were only slightly weaker than the Inferno Divine Emperor. Yet, they were so cruelly defeated. Many heads of aristocratic families and princes of states used to be high and mighty figures in the ruins of immortality, but at this moment, they were scared out of their wits. My lord is really too powerful. Long Xingnan and Bai Muxiue finally heaved a sigh of relief and revealed beautiful smiles. Invincible, invincible, invincible. Fu Heishui and Fu Heishui were so excited that they were flying up and down, cheering with joy. Come on. Come and have a fight with my lord. Tian Shu was emboldened. He picked up the wine jar and gulped down the wine for a while. His eyes were red as he waved his long saber and shouted. Retreat! The sect master of the Tianmong Grotto Heaven roared. At this moment, he was already horrified. Jiang Tian was too powerful. The dignified soul formation realm cultivators were as fragile as paper in front of Jiang Tian. They were crushed by Jiang Tian with a casual slap. Their cultivation was only on par with Ban Shan and Black White. If they continued to fight, what good would the result be? In fact, everyone was also aware of this. They didn't have the slightest intention to fight at all. They just wanted to escape as quickly as possible. The situation took a turn for the worse. They were defeated like a landslide. Jiang Tian's consecutive killing of Ban Shan and Black White had shocked everyone. For a moment, escape lights rose from all directions. Streaks of golden light shot out in all directions. There were also crystal warships, flying boats, flying swords, and all kinds of other flying Dharma artifacts. They flew away in all directions as if they were avoiding snakes and scorpions. Since I'm here, how can I leave without saying goodbye? Jiang Tian chuckled. He stepped on the air, and his supreme power interfered with the laws. He stepped on the space and shot out with the curvature of space. They were the pillars of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality, second only to the Academy, Sky Palace, and the Ruins Emperor's Palace. Since they couldn't be used by him, he would kill them with a slap and kill them all so that they wouldn't be a hindrance in the peak battle. Boom! Jiang Tian's speed was simply unparalleled. With his pure physical strength, he actually surpassed the speed of the Xian's secret art. In the blink of an eye, he caught up with the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven. This person was the first person to advocate a battle with Jiang Tian. He was very greedy and wanted to obtain Jiang Tian's cultivation methods and inheritance. Whoosh! Whoosh! His figure was like a butterfly dancing on the ice. He was graceful and elegant, but his speed was extremely fast. However, the next moment, he was stopped by Jiang Tian. The sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven shouted, "Tai Chu, no, Senior, no, Your Majesty, I am willing to sign a divine soul contract with you and follow you to the ruins of immortality. I will be loyal forever and will never betray you." It's too late. Jiang Tian didn't move at all and his eyes were cold. Tai Chu, do you really want to fight to the death with the ruins of immortality? You've already killed Emperor Sheng and the Grand Chancellor of the Academy. If you continue to kill, you will become the enemy of the entire world. No Grotto Heaven, sect or family will tolerate you. Besides, I'm a soul formation cultivator. How can I be controlled by you? Seeing this, the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven knew that it was impossible to be kind. His divine treasures trembled and rumbled. The gods sang and danced, as if they were chanting Buddhist scriptures. All kinds of wood element laws flickered around his body and the falling flowers fell like rain, colorful and crystal clear. All kinds of sword chi patterns were engraved on it. It looked magnificent, but in fact, one piece could easily kill a peak stage nascent soul cultivator. At this moment, the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven activated all his power and was ready to fight to the death with Jiang Tian. So what if I'm the enemy of the entire world? The ruins of immortality and the South Gate Galaxy are nothing to me. Seeing this, Jiang Tian just smiled and waved his right hand. Arg! An extremely shrill scream was heard, shaking the entire Xiantian mountain range and even interfering with the laws of heaven and earth. Everyone saw this in horror. The sword chi contained all kinds of laws. It suddenly became chaotic and shot into the body of the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven. In an instant, the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven became a sieve with countless holes. Countless arrows of blood spurted out and dyed the sky red. Divine blood dripped on the ground, containing powerful vitality. The grass grew into trees and the mountain range was instantly covered in green. A god pushed open the door of the divine treasures, broke out of his body and ran away. This god looked like the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven when he was young. He ran away with a face full of fear. Do you think you can escape? Jiang Tian chuckled and used the laws of Tao Tai. It was like a black hole that directly swallowed this god. Another peerless divine being, the master of the Grotto Heaven, had died. In the blink of an eye. The conversation between the two of them was completed with their immortal will. Thousands of words were exchanged in an instant. So, in everyone's eyes, Jiang Tian had killed another soul formation overlord in the blink of an eye. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of cultivators from the ruins of immortality had already been scared out of their wits. They only wished their parents had given them 2 more legs. Fight! Assist the Lord, stop them! The Green Dragon King, Tu Fei, Niu Duotian and Yun Zhongzi looked at each other. Their eyes were glittering and their blood was boiling. They knew that the real counterattack, the bloody massacre, had begun. Chapter 1609. Let's join hands and kill them all. Not even a chicken or dog will be spared. Tu Fei laughed like a bandit. A powerful demonic chi shot up to the sky, as if a demon god that had been sealed for thousands of years had suddenly awakened. Arg! Kill! 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 Tian Shu had drunk too much. His drowsy and red eyes were as if they were stained with blood, which was extremely terrifying. He swung his broadsword and pounced forward. Kill! Furious roars filled the sky. The assassins of the great bandits had been besieged like stray dogs during this period of time. They had to vent all the pent-up anger in their chests. In an instant, many assassins of the great bandits attacked the cultivators of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality. They overturned rivers and seas and tore the ground apart. They were invincible under the sky. Little kids, your skin is soft and tender. It's definitely delicious. Die! Heishui Fu broke through the space and invaded the flying boat of the Academy's soldiers. He opened his bloody mouth and screamed. The sound waves were rolling, and many nascent soul cultivators' skin and flesh were torn apart. Some Jindan realm cultivators were even directly turned into powder. The jade-like floor of the flying ship was instantly covered with a layer of blood-red film. Countless broken bones and organ fragments were everywhere. There was nothing to be merciful about. The disciples of the Academy were actually from the second-level and third-level worlds and belonged to the ancient deity land. But they had been brainwashed and were loyal to the Emperor of the Ruins, helping the evildoers and suppressing their own people. They were even more hateful than the invaders from the South Gate. Besides, Jiang Tian had already given them a chance, but they would never surrender. There was no need to be merciful. Fu Heishui's muscles were knotted and his body was covered with lumps of flesh. Two huge wings covered with dense black hair flapped on his back, blocking the sky and the sun. His bean-like eyes were fierce and he bared his fangs. Various Dharma laws surrounded him and blue thunderbolts exploded. He really looked like a demon or a god. He attacked ruthlessly. When he slapped, a person would immediately turn into a pool of flesh and blood. He opened his mouth and sucked, immediately turning the cultivator into a mummy. Even his chi, blood and spirit were sucked out. The Academy camp was already in chaos after the death of Ban Shan and the Black and White Suns. Now that they were invaded by Fu Heishui, they couldn't take it anymore. Run! Qing Aojuan, Su Changqing, Song Baoxin, and the other cultivators were all scared out of their wits. They abandoned their flying boats and fled on their flying swords. Pa! Fu Huairan also reached out and grabbed Song Baoxin's black-faced servant, Ah Sang. He extended his barbed tongue and licked her face. He grinned and said, "You look quite black. Could it be that you have the bloodline of the divine bat? Master, save me." Ah Sang was so scared that he screamed and peed in his pants. When Song Baoxin heard this, he turned his head to take a look. He could not help but widen his eyes as tears of blood rolled down his cheeks. Ah Sang! This woman had followed him for many years. She was a baby that he had picked up from a pile of corpses when he was just a few years old. Although they were called master and servant, they were actually a couple. At this moment, his heart was filled with regret. Kang Taechu was too strong. He actually turned defeat into victory and suppressed the cultivators of the Ruins of Immortality. If he had known this would happen, he would not have gotten involved in this matter. Now, he had suffered a double loss. Although he was terrified of Fu Huairan, he rushed forward fearlessly. He swung his long sword and slashed at Fu Huairan's arm with a cold light. Clang! There was a sound like metal colliding with stone. There were sparks, but there was not even the slightest white mark left on Fu Huairan's arm. Is this the power of love? Humans are really interesting creatures. Looking at the horrified Song Baoxin, Fu Huairan was so excited that his hand trembled. Pa! Ah Sang's body directly exploded. Blood and organs splattered everywhere. Her broken limbs fell to the ground and dyed the sky red. Ah! Demon, I'm going to kill you. Song Baoxin was so angry that he almost went crazy. He slashed at Fu Huairan again and again, displaying all the cultivation of a half-step nascent soul. Pa! Fu Huairan showed some irritation. He waved his hand casually and slapped Song Baoxin into a flat surface as if he was swatting a fly. Blood, organs, and bones formed a thin flat surface with a radius of dozens of meters. Cheng Aojuan, Su Changqing, and the other talents of the academy, even if they had been on the god of war list and enjoyed countless glory and attention, died in this cruel battle. This was a bloody scene, extremely shocking, bloody and cruel. The hundreds of thousands of cultivators present were in chaos. They flowed in all directions like tides, covering 100 miles. As far as the eye could see, there were people everywhere. They died very quickly. Broken bones flew everywhere and bodies fell like rain. Blood bloomed in the air like black dahlias. It could be said that the cultivators were like tigers in a flock of sheep, carrying out a massacre and crushing on a large scale. Wherever the chariot passed, nothing was left alive. Wherever the long sword went, there were no corpses left. Take this. In the midst of his arrogant laughter, Tu Fei threw out more than 10 large explosive array discs in a blink of an eye. One array disc could turn an area 10 miles wide into powder. It was as powerful as an attack from a peak-stage soul formation cultivator, which was invincible in this world. Immediately, the crystal warships of the cultivators of the ruins of deity were torn into pieces like paper. Flames of different colors swept across the sky and the cultivators inside were immediately turned into ashes. The sect master of the Tianmeng Grotto Heaven staggered and was covered in blood. He was surrounded by Niu Duotian and Yun Zhongzi and was severely injured. Get out of the way. If I attack with all my might, you might not be able to resist. Why do you have to fight to the death? The sect master of the Tianmeng Grotto Heaven shouted and threatened. That was not an exaggeration. After all, he was a soul formation cultivator. If he exploded, he could severely injure Niu Duotian and Yun Zhongzi. Zhao, look, suddenly, he heard an immortal will. The sect master of the Tianmeng Grotto Heaven turned around and saw it. Jiang Tian was holding Zhao Shanha's nascent soul as if it were a doll that could be crushed at any time. Let him go. We can negotiate. The sect master of the Tianmeng Grotto Heaven said with a trembling voice while blocking the attacks of Niu Duotian and Yun Zhongzi. Jiang Tian smiled and didn't say anything. He was playing with Zhao Shanha's nascent soul as if it were made of clay. The latter was almost destroyed and was screaming and begging for mercy. All of a sudden, Yun Zhongzi took advantage of the panicked state of the Tianmeng Grotto Heaven sect master to use the red-crowned crane divine sword. It pierced through the Tianmeng Grotto Heaven sect master's divine treasure at an unimaginable angle and killed him. I've been hit. The remaining divine soul of the sect master of the Tianmeng Grotto Heaven was filled with despair and sorrow. Ah, you've lived for thousands of years, but your mind is still so weak. You're like a 3-year-old child. Don't you know that you'll both die if you're distracted by your son? Jiang Tian said as he crushed Zhao Shanha's nascent soul with one hand without any emotion in his eyes. Then, the golden lake on his forehead rippled and the soul-swallowing divine will swept out and crushed the divine soul of the sect master of the Tianmeng Grotto Heaven. In the meantime, the group of heroes and assassins killed another soul formation cultivator. Seeing this, Jiang Tian's eyes glittered and he said softly, "All right, I wanted to give you a chance to train, but it's about time. Leave the rest of the soul formation cultivators to me. Go and kill the nascent soul cultivators to improve your power." He flew across 100 miles and came above the sect master of the 10,000 soul Grotto Heaven and stomped his foot. The sect master of the 10,000 souls Grotto Heaven had a drastic change in expression. He waved the 10,000 souls myriad banner in his hand. Tens of thousands of souls roared in unison, shaking the heavens and the earth. They formed a huge skull and swept out, attacking Jiang Tian. That was the divine soul of 10,000 nascent soul cultivators that the Grotto Heaven had collected over 10,000 years. After being refined with a secret technique, its soul energy was very powerful and could make people lose their souls and turn them into soul energy in the soul banner. Jiang Tian didn't even dodge or use the soul-swallowing divine soul. He just continued to stomp his foot. Crack! The corporeal body of the sect master of the 10,000 soul Grotto Heaven was stomped into a meat patty by Jiang Tian. Blood that was filled with eerie ghost chi swept across the sky. Every drop of blood that landed on the ground was like poison, causing the vitality of the surrounding 1 mile to wither and turn into a land of death. But this time, Jiang Tian didn't waste any of it. Once the primordial Taotai returning spirit law was unleashed, a whirlpool spun and swallowed the sect master of the 10,000 soul grotto heaven, scattered qi, blood, spirit, and even the incomplete god. They became Jiang Tian's resources. Jiang Tian felt a few waves of complicated energy surging out of the spirit embryo and filling his limbs and bones. Jiang Tian's primal chaos creation chant was already very powerful. It was an emperor's throne technique, and it was practically made for the primal chaos divine physique. Once the primal chaos divine physique was formed, its power increased even more. Now, he could even refine a star, let alone a mere god. Unfortunately, he was already very powerful, and this god only increased his cultivation by half a level. He was still a distance away from the second level of the nascent soul realm. He refined the sect master of the 10,000 soul grotto heaven into his resources. At the same time, the soul formation cultivators, sect masters and family masters who were fighting with the bandits and assassins almost went crazy after seeing this. They trembled and begged Jiang Tian, "Please don't do this. Your Majesty, please spare my life. This old man is willing to lead the families to abandon the darkness and join the light. Your Majesty, our sect didn't participate in the battle against the bandits. Your Majesty, please understand. We're willing to fight against the Ruins Emperor. The Ruins Emperor's tyranny is unpopular. In fact, I've wanted to rebel for a long time." Many experts spoke. Some even rubbed their palms and cursed at the empire of the ruins of immortality as if they were facing the enemy who had killed their father. Unfortunately, it's too late. Jiang Tian's face was as cold as iron. He didn't have any intention of stopping. It was certainly good to have a few more soul formation cultivators following him. But that was an external force after all. How could the power of others compare to his own cultivation? If he could kill and refine all the soul formation cultivators today, he would have a chance to reach the second level of the nascent soul realm or even higher. Then, he would have a higher chance of winning the battle against the 3 giants and the old Ruins Emperor. How could he miss this opportunity? Chapter 16:10. Bang! Jiang Tian stepped in the air and the air collapsed. He had already flashed out like a bolt of lightning. His leg was like a heavenly blade, breaking a soul formation ancestral patriarch's waist. His divine treasures collapsed and his divine blood spilled out, shining like gems. That was the master of a family, a soul formation cultivator who had been famous for thousands of years. His name was Divine Lord Lianhua. He had once dominated an era and was invincible. His name had shocked the world for thousands of years and nobody dared to provoke or anger him. However, at that moment, it was smashed apart by a single kick from Jiang Tian. Its body that was comparable to precious metal was easily shattered like a fragile piece of porcelain. Arg! His god screamed and flashed with light. Many Dharma laws and fragments of the Grand Tao floated, but he still ran for his life. Whoosh! Whoosh! The Taotai returning primordial spirit was activated again, swallowing and destroying the god. His miserable screams shook the world. Under the crazy refinement, Jiang Tian's true essence increased by another 5%. Another powerful Divine Lord Lianhua, had died. Run! This guy is so terrifying. The remaining soul formation cultivators of the ruins of deity were almost crazy when they saw a fiend god. They just wanted to leave this dangerous place. But they couldn't do as they wished. They were entangled by the 7 bandits and couldn't get away. After all, the 7 bandits were about the same level as them. Jiang Tian rushed over and fought with those soul formation cultivators. He didn't use any Dharma power except for the swallowing part. He destroyed the enemies with his strong body. This was shocking. All the cultivators of the ruins of deity were dumbfounded. Once a cultivator reached the soul formation level, he would become a god in the human world. The difference between the nascent soul level and the soul formation level wasn't just the level, but the level of life. It was the difference between a mortal and a deity. Soul formation overlords were no longer mortals, nor were they essence chi beings. They had bodies of dharma laws that wouldn't decay for thousands of years. They were called divine bodies, which were extremely tough and powerful. Not even 100 nuclear bombs could seriously injure a real soul formation cultivator. Those soul formation cultivators all controlled dharma laws and touched the grand Tao. They cast dharma laws and tried to kill and stop Jiang Tian. But it was useless. These extremely dangerous and tough laws and domains that could topple mountains and overturn seas were easily torn apart like spider webs by Jiang Tian's rampage. Jiang Tian was completely capable of engaging in close combat and killing with his bare hands. Clang! Clang! As their fists and legs collided, the sound they emitted was like a resounding bell, and the sound waves shook the world while the waves of air surged and spread towards the surroundings. With a single glance, sound waves surged in the heavens and the earth, causing space to shake and warp, and the scenery was miserable and blurry. Jiang Tian's punches and kicks all contained a kind of aura that could swallow mountains and rivers, and destroy the boundless universe. It made people's hearts tremble, and they couldn't help but want to kowtow. Bang bang bang. The power and strength of Jiang Tian's chaotic divine body was truly unleashed. He used his fists to smash their bodies of laws and tough divine bodies into pieces. Their arms, legs, and skulls, which were shining with sparkling light, floated in the air, giving people a tragic and magnificent feeling. Miserable shrill cries, howls of despair, and roars of rage rose and fell, and they shook the world and shook the hearts of all. All kinds of blood energy filled the sky like red clouds. The remaining soul energy and divine souls of the fallen soul formation cultivators interfered with reality, as if ghosts were crying and wolves were howling. If the nascent soul cultivators were in that battlefield, their divine souls would have been destroyed. That was the first battle Jiang Tian had fought after he formed the supreme chaotic nine orifices divine infant. Jiang Tian's divine body was also used to train himself. Jiang Tian fought like a cicada in winter. But after he punched, the earth shook, the wind blew and the space was torn apart. The head of a half-soul formation cultivator exploded and he died right away. Jiang Tian's eyes were cold and he didn't show any mercy. He waved his fingers and the space in 100-mile radius was split open by pure energy. Countless crystal battleships exploded and the nascent soul cultivators on them were torn in half. Jiang Tian stepped in the air and arrived in front of another soul formation grand cultivator. He grabbed his legs and opened his hands. Everyone saw that in shock. The body of that peerless grand cultivator, known as Divine Lord Lei Xing, was torn in half by Jiang Tian. The two legs and broken limbs were held in Jiang Tian's hands. Blood scattered outwards, and a string of blood produced 1,000 zhang long green lightning dragon, blasting the void apart. An expanse of vital energy produced 10,000 zhang long lead clouds, covering the sky and covering the earth. That was apparently a soul formation grand cultivator who had mastered the wind and thunder dharma laws. The remaining energy after his death was earth-shattering and caused the grand Tao to resonate, but he was still torn apart by Jiang Tian easily. At the moment, Jiang Tian was like a god in the divine world. His divine body was indestructible and his fighting power was unparalleled. He was invincible, which made people feel terrified. His divine body didn't emit any light, he looked ordinary. However, his long robe fluttered in the wind and his thick black hair fluttered like a waterfall. His eyes were as bright as lightning, which made people's hearts tremble. Jiang Tian didn't let those soul formation grand cultivators go to waste. Their bodies, divine bodies and dharma power were all swallowed by the Taotai divine law. Their incomparably vast and surging qi and blood became the supreme resources for Jiang Tian's cultivation. Under the circulation of the primal chaos creation art, Jiang Tian's cultivation base quickly broke through to the first level of the nascent soul realm, and even headed straight for the second level. In the end, The sect masters of the 5 grotto heavens, the elders, the grand elders and the masters of the families, the 18 soul formation cultivators who had just attacked, were all killed and swallowed by Jiang Tian. None of them escaped. The senior members of the 5 grotto heavens were all dead. Clatter, clatter, clatter. Only Divine Lord Sun Shao and Xian Nu, who had surrendered to Jiang Tian in the Water Moon Grotto Heaven, were left. They were spared by Jiang Tian, but their teeth were still chattering. He defeated all the Divine Lords in the ruins of deity alone. Not even the virtuous cultivators in the deity ground and the heavenly courts could do that. Divine Lord Xian Nu's eyes twitched. He felt lucky that he had chosen to follow Jiang Tian back then. Otherwise, he would have definitely died that day. Ah, he's the only one with such power in the entire ruins of deity. Divine Lord Sun Shao also couldn't stay calm. He stared at Jiang Tian with admiration, wishing he could be in his place. If even a Supreme Divine Lord was so terrified, the rest of the cultivators would be even more terrified. All the cultivators were terrified. They didn't even dare to fight back or run away. They withdrew their Dharma power and all kinds of Dharma artifacts, lowered their battleships and flying swords, and knelt on the ground, calling him, Your Majesty, and, Heavenly the Arch. The Xiantian mountain range, which used to be magnificent, had almost been removed from the continent of the ruins of deity. The mountains had turned into gullies and the abyss had been filled. It was as if the world had changed in the blink of an eye. There was no one else in the sky where the ocean of energy was boiling. Only Jiang Tian was left. He was in a black outfit, with black hair and black eyes. He stood in the sky and looked down at the world. At this moment, everyone was looking at Jiang Tian with horrified eyes. Their teeth were chattering non-stop. 18 soul formation grand cultivators. A total of 18 peerless Sir Gods had been slaughtered by Jiang Tian like he was chopping vegetables and melons. The soul formation cultivators of the 5 grotto heavens had all been killed. Ban Shan and Hai Zi were the Grand Chancellor of the Academy. They had been taught by the headmaster and had mastered Dharma laws. However, they were still defeated by Jiang Tian. Besides, all of this had happened after Jiang Tian had killed the Divine Emperor of Fire and used up his energy. Furthermore, Jiang Tianqi's old black clothes were not stained by a single speck of dust, nor were they damaged in the slightest. His breathing was steady, and his expression was calm. Apparently, he still had energy left. He's so powerful. At this moment, even Ji Yusha, who had never thought highly of Jiang Tian, was completely conquered by Jiang Tian. Her eyes were full of admiration and she couldn't wait to worship him. The empire of the ruins of deity had been established for 10,000 years and had a long history. In the long river of history, it wasn't as if there hadn't been a monstrous genius who had dominated a generation and far surpassed his peers. But that was a battle of the same level. A nascent soul cultivator could defeat a nascent soul cultivator of the same generation. It was difficult to challenge a half-soul formation cultivator. Just like Jiang Tian. He could easily kill a soul formation cultivator with just his nascent soul level cultivation and his physical body. There had never been such a case in the history of the empire of the ruins of deity. It had never even happened in the era of the ancient heavenly courts. Chapter 1611. Jiang Tian had killed 18 soul formation grand cultivators on the Xiantian mountain range. When the news spread, the entire ruins of deity and many other worlds were shocked. The ruins of deity. In terms of the dimensions of the universe, it was a cultivation planet 10 times or even 100 times larger than Earth. It was surrounded by countless spirit chi tides, Dharma laws and Taoist connotation. It was located in the most suitable orbit of South Gate 2 and was rotating slowly. Besides, there were many planets around it, such as Hailan and Barren Desert, which looked extremely vast and vast. At the same time, billions of people on the vast continents in the ruins of deity and many other worlds were in silence. The streets were empty, the clouds in the sky seemed to have stopped, and the breeze seemed to have been frozen. In the shops, restaurants, brothels, mansions of wealthy families, and the heavenly paradises that hung high in the sky. As long as there was a golden light screen, everyone who saw the scene was dumbfounded. They were motionless like clay sculptures, as if their souls had been sucked out. Only a still picture was left. No one had expected that Jiang Tian would actually win the battle. In fact, the battle between Jiang Tian and Divine Emperor Lai Hua had attracted too much attention. It could be said that the ruins of Deity Dynasty had never been as magnificent as that day since it was established 10,000 years ago, which attracted the attention of all the cultivators. After all, Jiang Tian was really powerful. Ever since he entered the South Gate 2 system, he had killed nascent soul cultivators, defeated the 3 golden crows, slaughtered divine emperors and killed the crown prince. He was invincible in the 4 worlds below the Hylon world. In the end, he teamed up with the 7 bandits and caused a huge stir in the ruins of Deity. He started a massacre right under the nose of the Emperor of the Ruins. In the end, Divine Emperor Lai Hua, the 2 chancellors of the academy and the 6 grotto heavens joined forces to kill Jiang Tian on the Xiantian mountain range. He was so unscrupulous and reckless. He could be said to be the most powerful bandit since the establishment of the ruins of Deity, a peerless hero and a world-destroying fiend. Even the overlords of the bandits and assassins, who claimed to be the descendants of the ancient heavenly courts, had never caused such a scene. However, they could not help but admit that Jiang Tian was the strongest genius in the history of the ruins of immortality. Stepping into the nascent soul realm with less than 50 years of lifespan was already a heaven-shattering achievement. It was as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. More importantly, Jiang Tian was only at the nascent soul level, but he had the power to kill half-soul formation cultivators and even soul formation cultivators. Once he entered the nascent soul level, he could even kill soul formation cultivators. That was unbelievable and nobody could accept it. Therefore, the battle between Jiang Tian and the Inferno Godly Emperor attracted the attention of countless people in the ruins of immortality. No matter what, Kang Te-Chu is no match for the Inferno Godly Emperor. They're just ants born on a remote planet. Just like a pig or a dog, how can you be compared to the dignified Inferno Godly Emperor? Previously, when he killed Divine Emperor Hanshi, it doesn't mean anything. He must have used some despicable means to plot against me. He definitely isn't strong or has a deep cultivation base. That's right. Otherwise, why would Jiang Taichu not dare to show himself and act like a coward when the army of the ruins of immortality was beating up the bandits like dogs during this period of time? A lot of cultivators were discussing. From the barren desert world to the flourishing Tianmong Grotto heaven. From the desolate Xianqiu ancient city to the vast and magnificent divine city of the ruins of immortality. All the cultivators of the ruins of immortality were not optimistic about Jiang Tian. They were full of mockery and disdain. The empire of the ruins of immortality was built by invaders. 10,000 years ago, when the deity ground and many other planets entered the orbit of the South Gate 2 stars, the cultivators of the South Gate 1 star quickly invaded and occupied this cultivation planet when the wanderers of the deity ground entered the age of Tao damage. In the long history, they expelled the wanderers of the deity ground to low-level worlds. On the one hand, they falsified and burned historical books, promoted enslavement education, and used the academy selection system to soften and confuse the descendants of the indigenous people. On the other hand, they built countless qi-attracting arrays to secretly absorb the spirit qi of many worlds into the planet of the ruins of immortality. By then, the indigenous people had been reduced to the lowest level of slaves. Whether it was cultivation arts, cultivation resources, strength, or the number of people, they couldn't compare with the invaders. The key was that the descendants of the wanderers had long forgotten the truth of the history of the ancient heavenly courts and had forgotten to resist. They regarded the invaders as their masters, the executioners who slaughtered them as the arbiters of fate, and the ruins of immortality, which belonged to them, as the deity realm hanging high in the sky, an unreachable place that needed to be worshipped. In the eyes of the cultivators of the ruins of immortality, they despised the low-level worlds and the people there. It was like how humans looked at the nests of ants and the nests of rats. They thought that it was just a barbarian land, a remote place full of low-level creatures, dirty and lowly, who were not even qualified to be cultivation furnaces. They certainly didn't think that Jiang Tian would be able to challenge Divine Emperor Lai Hua. However, when they saw Jiang Tian kill Divine Emperor Lai Hua and 18 Soul Formation Grand Cultivators with their own eyes, they were shocked. Everyone was shocked. Everyone felt as if they had been hit by a stick and their minds went blank. Everyone thought that even if Jiang Tian had cultivated in seclusion and made a breakthrough, he had only just entered the nascent soul level. He was still far from the soul formation level, especially a peerless emperor like Divine Emperor Lai Hua. He might be able to resist a dozen attacks, but it definitely wouldn't last long. Besides, the two Grand Chancellors of the Academy and the Sect Masters of the Grotto Heavens and Soul Formation Grand Cultivators were there. It was like a group of boxers who had won a gold belt forming a super luxurious lineup to fight a 3-year-old child together. It was as easy as turning their hands. Nobody had thought that it would end like this. Divine Emperor Lai Hua, a peerless Divine Emperor and the direct disciple of the Old Ruins Emperor, had been killed by Jiang Tian with ease. Even the two Grand Chancellors of the Academy and the Sect Masters of the Grotto Heavens were crushed by Jiang Tian's body as if he were cutting vegetables. That meant that the 6 Grotto Heavens only existed in name. The 6 pillars above the ruins of deity were broken at the same time. All the forces outside of the ruins of deity collapsed immediately. Besides, Jiang Tian didn't use any tricks or secret arts or Dao artifacts. He simply pushed forward with his body and punched and kicked many soul formation cultivators like a bulldozer crushing eggs. When they came back to themselves, countless cultivators and mortals in the ruins of deity were enraged, furious and crying. Divine Emperor Lai Hua is a peerless expert with countless divine powers and dharma laws. He's like a true god descending to the mortal world. How could he die? Some cultivators looked pale and sad, as if the sky had collapsed and their fathers had died. Divine Emperor Lai Hua. How could you leave us? What should we do? Countless people in the ruins of deity wailed and cried. Blood and tears rolled down their chests. They were in so much pain that they wanted to die. Divine Emperor Lai Hua was indeed a wise lord. The third emperor of the ruins of deity, the Empress of the ruins of deity, once led the 9 troops on an expedition to the dimensional worlds to quell the chaos caused by the 7 major bandits. He established many agencies in the inferior worlds and created the special envoy system. He once created the war god role of the ruins of deity, established the academy and a selection system to select talents from the inferior worlds. This included erasing the history of the celestial land, the ancient heavenly court, burning ancient texts, and killing those who spread them. He also made some contributions, one after another. It could be said that to the people of the ruins of immortality, the Inferno godly emperor was a wise ruler. His achievements were brilliant and incomparably glorious. For them, the feeling of the sky collapsing wasn't an exaggeration, it was real. Soul Formation Grand Cultivators intercepted countless Dharma laws of the world and condensed them into fragments of the Grand Tao, turning them into gods in their bodies. They had to go through tribulation when they reached the nascent soul level or the soul formation level. Cultivators and mortals who stole the laws of heaven in this world would naturally be killed and devoured by the world. However, once one succeeded in transcending the tribulation and obtained a position as a result, one would be recognized by the heavens and earth. When they turned into gods in the human world, the Dharma laws and Grand Tao inside them could resonate with the world, as if they were the children of the world. And once they died, the world would be sad, angry and shocked, as if it had lost its beloved children. The sky wailed, the wind howled and the rain fell and thunder rumbled. The other creatures also felt the will of the world. They were depressed, angry, sad and confused, as if they had nothing to rely on. Many Grotto Heavens and the 100 Moon Academy were also gloomy. Ban Shan and the Black and White Child have left us forever. On the mountain behind the academy, in a quiet place, Jade Lotus Fairy, Yanhua, Xianhu, and the other chancellors were looking at the golden light curtain with sadness and pain. Kang Teichu's men attacked the soldiers of the academy. Isn't he bullying the weak? Using your strength to bully the weak, despicable and shameless. Does he really think that he's the most reasonable just because he's the most powerful? Many of the Academy's disciples were enraged and shouted loudly. They wanted nothing more than to fight Jiang Tian for 300 rounds and tear him into pieces. Only by burning his bones and scattering his ashes would they be able to vent their anger. The headmaster has appeared. At this time, someone suddenly exclaimed as he stared at the golden light screen in disbelief. Then, countless people in front of the light curtain saw a tall, strong, and dignified figure appear on the messy Shantian mountain range. It was an old man. The old man was wearing an old green robe, but it didn't have a speck of dust on it, giving people a sense of cleanliness. His face was thin and simple, but there was a hint of dignity in his kind temperament. It was the headmaster. Chapter 16:12. When the headmaster appeared, the entire ruins of immortality quieted down. Deep reverence and gratitude appeared on the faces of hundreds of millions of people. They were like devout believers who had seen a true God. Greetings, headmaster. A moment later, everyone kowtowed with their foreheads on the ground. Their faces were full of reverence. If the headmaster had not been born, the ruins of immortality would have been like a long night. The headmaster was one of the 3 giants in the ruins of immortality. He had once assisted the old ruins emperor in defeating the natives of the deity ground, establishing the empire of the ruins of immortality, building the 100 Moon Academy, and creating the Dian Taoist law. Countless soul formation and nascent soul grand cultivators in the ruins of immortality had received his guidance. His cultivation methods were unparalleled and his divine powers were unpredictable. He had dominated the ruins of immortality for 10,000 years and was admired by countless people. In the hearts of the people, his status was very high, just like the Buddha and the true God. It was not because the headmaster could oppress people with his power, but because the dead people respected him from the bottom of their hearts. The headmaster came out of the mountain. He was simple and unadorned, pure and natural. He was not surrounded by rays of light or auspicious colors, nor was he boiling or roaring. He did not oppress people with his power. He simply stood there, floating in the air, but it was as if this was how it should be, as if it was the natural order of things. It showed that his control over the great Tao of this world had reached the point of perfection. It was as if he was a part of the great Tao. His face was not very old, and there were only a few wrinkles. His face was lean and handsome, but his eyes were extremely old, with traces of the passage of time. It was as if all the vicissitudes of life were contained in them. They were incomparably deep and wise. The headmaster has finally come out of the mountain. Is he going to fight Kang Taechu himself? Even if Kang Taechu is the reincarnation of a true immortal or the resurrection of the old devil, he is definitely no match for the headmaster. God bless the ruins of immortality. Fortunately, we have the headmaster. Many cultivators were shocked and could not keep calm. This was one of the last trump cards of the ruins of immortality. The headmaster was like a pillar supporting the sky. He was one of the most respected and powerful beings in the ruins of immortality. He stood at the top of the ruins of immortality and was called the guardian of the ruins of immortality. He was far more powerful than the divine emperor of fire and the sect masters of the grotto heavens. In fact, many emperors and sect masters of grotto heavens were proud of being taught by the headmaster. Therefore, the cultivators of the ruins of immortality basically believed that Jiang Tian was no match for the headmaster. As expected of the sage that appears once every 10,000 years in the ruins of immortality, Jiang Tian looked at the headmaster. His pupils shrank and his eyes narrowed. No matter how strong his divine sense was and how profound his cultivation method was, he still felt like he was looking up at a high mountain when he faced the headmaster. It was as if he was facing an abyss that was hard to shake and hard to see. After all, he was an experienced divinity transformation stage cultivator with 10,000 years of experience. He had been through the battle between the South Gate and the deity ground and had lived for more than 10,000 years. Although he was not as strong and experienced as Jiang Tian, who had lived 2 lives, he was still an unparalleled grand cultivator who dominated a star system. But Jiang Tian was still relaxed. Although it was not easy to shake, it was not impossible to shake it. In Jiang Tian's eyes, the headmaster was just harder to kill. I'm a teacher of the 100 Moons Academy, a poor and pedantic scholar. Greetings, fellow Taoist. To everyone's surprise, when the headmaster saw Jiang Tian, he was not angry at all. Instead, he stood 3 miles away and bowed to him respectfully. Be careful, Senior Tai Chu. Your Majesty, this man is powerful. We have to be careful. This old bastard must be up to no good. The warriors and assassins were vigilant, nervous and frightened. Many Dharma arts, divine powers, Dharma treasures and Taoist artifacts were ready to be used, as if they had seen a peerless god of death. I'm Kang Te Chu, an itinerant cultivator from another planet. Nice to meet you, headmaster. Jiang Tian only smiled faintly and returned the greeting unhurriedly. The old man once read in the ancient books left by the heavenly courts of the previous dynasty that some cultivators with special bloodlines in the deity ground were like the children of God. Once they entered the nascent soul level, they would be able to form a supreme Dharma law and kill soul formation grand cultivators. The old man used to think it was a fallacy, but after seeing it today, he finally realized that it was true. Did you get many inheritances from the heavenly courts in the solar system? The headmaster glanced at the messy Xiantian mountain range and took a few deep looks at Jiang Tian. He sighed with emotion. His hair fluttered slightly in the wind, and his old green robe stretched out like a flag. He gave off a feeling of being at ease, but also as steady as Mount Tai. What does a mere ancient heavenly court amount to? Headmaster, even though you're talented and powerful, you're still confined to a small place like the South Gate Galaxy. How would you know the vastness of the universe and the star ocean? Jiang Tian smiled and said calmly, there are a lot of cultivation arts that are more powerful than the Dharma arts in the deity ground and the cultivation arts in the ruins of deities. Unfortunately, you don't know. The reason why his cultivation speed was so fast and he had formed the chaotic divine body in this life was because of the heavenly treasures, deity ingredients and divine materials left by the ancient sages. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to make bricks without straws. But when it came to cultivation arts, Jiang Tian mostly came from the central galaxy, or even the deity realm and the divine realm. He had also mastered them himself. My friend, can you tell me where you're from? Upon hearing this, the headmaster's body trembled slightly. His expression was extremely solemn. He revealed a thoughtful and curious look and asked thoughtfully, in fact, the old man used to study you for a long time. There were many theories about your background. Some said you were blessed, some said you were a deity, and some even said you were the reincarnation of the Shang Emperor and the Ao Emperor. But the more the old man researched, the more he felt something was wrong. The idea of reincarnation is illusory. Besides, even the Ao Emperor and the others were suppressed by the changes of the Grand Tao back then and couldn't use the Dharma arts in the deity ground. But you've successfully improved the inheritances of the Great Ko dynasty. I don't believe in the theory of being a deity and being blessed either. Strength can be inherited quickly, but temperament, strategy and will can't be. Ever since I started the battle with you in the ruins of deity, I felt like I was facing a peerless god of war who had lived for tens of thousands of years. His mind was as firm as a rock, his mind was as deep as the ocean and he was resolute, as if he had been through countless battles. I couldn't see the slightest bit of panic or hesitation in your eyes and actions, as if everything in the world was within your expectations and you could make the most rational and optimal choice in an instant. After hearing what you said today, I'm even more convinced that you're not the reincarnation of a grand cultivator. Then, he looked at Jiang Tian with a questioning look. Jiang Tian smiled and said, I'm indeed the reincarnation of a grand cultivator. You're really the Ao Emperor or Zhongli? How is that possible? Many people were shocked. Impossible. The Ao Emperor was only half a step away from the void return level, but he was suppressed by the changes of the Grand Tao in the world. You, on the other hand, will be much more powerful than the void return level in the future. Even the headmaster could not believe it. His eyes were filled with astonishment. Suddenly, he seemed to understand something and said softly, could it be that you are from the legendary Central Galaxy? He had participated in the operation to kill the Ao Emperor's descendants, but apparently, Jiang Tian was much more powerful than the Ao Emperor at the moment. You really do know about the Central Galaxy. Jiang Tian looked at the teacher thoughtfully. Half a step away from the void return level. Void return level. That's nothing. Jiang Tian snickered and looked up at the sky. His deep eyes seemed to be able to see through the deity ground, the arrays and the billions of planes. He seemed to be able to see the supreme world enveloped in deity light that suppressed everything. He said leisurely, "What's the matter with you? In my previous life, I went to the deity realm and killed tens of thousands of deities. I was called the deity emperor and entered the divine realm. I was on par with the heavenly masters and Buddha and almost created a world that belonged to me." He had used his divine sense to transmit these words. Only the headmaster could hear him, so no one else could hear him. What? Is there really a deity realm in this world where one can become a deity? And a real entity? The teacher was extremely shocked. His Dharma power and divine powers were supreme in the ruins of deity. He seemed to be omniscient and omnipotent, full of wisdom and philosophy. But at this moment, he was like an ignorant child in front of Jiang Tian, with ignorance and desire. Some cultivators of the South Gate had entered the Central Galaxy with the Universe Teleport Array, but they were still at the edge of the Central Galaxy. The information that these cultivators sent back was only a few words, and the legends of the immortal world were not detailed. In the history of the South Gate Galaxy, being able to reach the soul formation level was the limit. Void return, Tao reunion, perfected immortal and tribulation transcendence to the deity realm were just legends. No cultivator in history had ever done it. Even reaching the Central Galaxy was a luxury. Of course there are deities. Jiang Tian smiled and said, "Let's not talk about the deities who have ascended to the deity realm. Tao reunion perfected immortals can live for 3,000 years as spring and autumn. 10,000 years is just a spring and autumn. They can live for 1,000,000 years and swallow the sun, shatter planets with a snap of their fingers and travel freely in the universe, using galaxies as baths and the sun and moon as pillows. They can be called deities. As for the deities in the deity realm, they can live as long as the sky even if the universe collapses and worlds are destroyed." The teacher was dumbfounded, as if he were listening to a book from heaven. He had never thought that he would be so insignificant. In the ruins of deity, he was a saint that appeared once in 10,000 years, one of the three most powerful beings and a teacher and friend of the emperor of the ruins of deity. In this world, he was second only to one person and above billions of people. And yet, he had never thought that the world would be so vast. It was an extremely vast world that was beyond his knowledge. Jiang Tian looked at the dumbfounded teacher with a hint of viciousness in his eyes. He smiled and said, "You and I have introduced ourselves. Can we fight now?" As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. The entire ruins of deity was shocked. Kang Te-Chu was really domineering. He dared to challenge the teacher. Chapter 16:13. However, the master quickly became serious. He cupped his hands again and said solemnly, "Brother Tai-Chu, I didn't mean to offend you, senior. I'm here to negotiate." To show his sincerity and respect, he had already used the honorific, brother, and was very humble. But considering Jiang Tian's long lifespan in his previous life, Jiang Tian could afford to be called brother. Negotiate? Jiang Tian smiled calmly and said, "That's right. I've talked to Chancellor Yan Hua and Prince Chunyu, who I killed, about the terms of the negotiation. Either you go back to your South Gate 1 star. Otherwise, I'll kill all of you, not leaving even a chicken or dog alive. This world should belong to the wanderers of the deity ground. Brother Tai-Chu, if we can return to the South Gate 1 star, why do we have to go on an expedition to this world?" The headmaster shook his head as if he had aged a few hundred years in an instant. He smiled bitterly and said with bitterness and sorrow, "In fact, the planet of life on the South Gate 1 star was destroyed 8,000 years ago. We're the real wanderers." What? Jiang Tian was stunned. In fact, he regarded the Ruins Emperor as an enemy, but he also knew that the Ruins Emperor had a powerful backer, which was the Southgate 1 star. But he had never thought that the Southgate 1 star had already become a land of death. We fought against the heavenly courts of the previous dynasty and invaded the ruins of deity. We had no choice. Because the Southgate 1 star was facing a world-ending disaster. And now, the apocalypse had already spread to the Southern Gate 2 stars. The ruins of deity, Hylon, desert, fertile land, and dozens of other worlds will be destroyed in 100 years. Or even shorter. The master didn't speak with his immortal will, he spoke with his mouth. His words resounded throughout the ruins of deity and even spread to the second and third dimensions through the Dharma artifacts. At that moment, the entire world of the ruins of deity was deeply shocked. What? The Southgate galaxy will be destroyed in 100 years. Or even shorter. Countless cultivators felt their hearts skip a beat. Some were sad, some were confused, some were shocked, and some couldn't believe it. They all looked at the Xiantian mountain range, the light screen, and Jiangtian on the light screen. Even the Great Ko's group of heroes were stunned. In fact, the rumor that the ruins of immortality was facing the end of the world had always been circulating, but it had never been publicly acknowledged by the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality. The Southgate star system doesn't actually have 2 stars, but a third star. This star was called the third star, or the companion star. It's just that the third star is very far away from the first and second stars. Its volume is only 1/10 or even 1/100th of the size of the first and second stars. It's similar to the sun in your world. Furthermore, it's in a relatively stable and balanced structure with the first and second stars. Most of the time, the third star's gravitational force and the heat it gives can be ignored. The headmaster said in a deep voice, "We used to live on the wood spirit star around the Southgate 1 star. It was a world where spiritual chi was as abundant as a waterfall, heavenly materials and earthly treasures were as abundant as an ocean, a prosperous population, and a thriving cultivation civilization. It was not inferior to the deity ground at all. That used to be our hometown." He waved his hand casually and withdrew a brand image magic artifact that was mottled with copper rust and had extremely profound and ancient markings on it. It seemed as if it came from the last era. The branded Dharma artifact left the headmaster's palm lightly. It spun and emitted thousands of rays of light, forming a vivid picture. It looked very vivid and vivid. This is the legendary wood spirit star. It's 100 times more prosperous than the ruins of immortality. I heard that this is our ancestral land, but nobody talks about it anymore. It seems to have become a taboo. I heard that the wood spirit star has disappeared. It disappeared into thin air. How is that possible? Where did it go? That's a planet with life. Everyone was shocked. Even though it was very quiet on the scene and in front of the light screens, the cultivators were discussing and communicating with their immortal will. Looking down from the sky, the wood spirit star was a cultivation planet several times larger than the ruins of immortality. It was vast and boundless, shrouded in endless light and auspicious chi. The spirit meridians were like lofty mountains and lofty ridges, as vigorous as dragons lying across the earth. All kinds of spirit springs flowed, and silver waterfalls fell down 30,000 feet, shaking the sky. All kinds of spirit beasts and spirit medicines grew on the mountains, shining with divine light. Golden-winged giant rocks that were thousands of feet long soared into the sky. Every time they rose and fell, they would grab demonic beasts that were 2 or 3 times larger than themselves. Their cries shook the sky. Cities big and small were scattered all over the place, enveloped in dazzling divine arrays that could withstand the attacks of soul formation stage cultivators. The buildings were streamlined, as if they were immortal palaces. They were extremely exquisite and looked like a futuristic world. The cultivators seemed to have the ability to pick the stars and the moon. It was very prosperous. Battleships and flying ships flew across the sky. Judging from the scale and speed, their refining level was much higher than that of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality. The cultivators present had strong immortal will. They knew that even if the headmaster created the illusion himself, it was still different from the real immortal will. They could tell at a glance that it was real. Of course, with Jiang Tian's immortal will, he could also tell that the picture was real. However, he still remained calm and unmoved. It could be called a cultivation planet, but it was still incomparable to the spirit chi planets and Dharma laws planets Jiang Tian had seen in the central galaxy. Of course, the wood spirit planet was indeed dazzling in a peripheral galaxy like the Milky Way. Yes, where did the wood spirit planet go? The headmaster showed a hint of sadness and said. 30,000 years ago, the cultivators on the wood spirit planet began to detect that the third planet had begun to expand rapidly and its mass was also increasing. The equilibrium of the three planets in the South Gate galaxy was gradually broken. At first, it wasn't obvious. It was just a sudden increase in temperature, a drought, a volcanic eruption, a major earthquake, or the extinction of a species. That was nothing for the cultivators, especially for a cultivation sacred ground where many soul formation cultivators were born. We could fly in the sky and go underground to save people in danger. We could move mountains and seas and stabilize the earth veins. We could summon the wind and rain and control the weather. We thought we could save our world. But gradually, the situation went out of control. Even though we thought we were the supreme gods in the human world, we were still so tiny and weak in front of the ruthless power of nature. The third planet and the South Gate galaxy gradually moved closer to each other. The third planet was getting closer and closer to our ancestral land, the wood spirit planet. At that time, the wood spirit planet didn't have night and day. There were only two suns, one big and one small. The Southern Gate 3 stars even became bigger and bigger, covering a third of the sky. The weather became incomparably hot, and the beasts, mortals, and all other creatures turned into dried corpses by the thousands. Starving people were everywhere. On the ground, lava flowed, and water vapor evaporated. It was said that the wood spirit planet was twice as large as the deity ground and had a population of hundreds of billions. But after that, the population was only 1,000th of the original. In 10 years, all the mortals had died. Only about 1 or 200 million cultivators were still alive. In the end, even the spirit chi and essence chi that the cultivators relied on to survive became thinner and thinner. Even golden core cultivators with bodies as tough as copper skin and iron bones would not be able to withstand it. The wood spirit planet fell into despair. Laws were broken and morals were lost. The dynasties, states, alliances, sects and families were all disbanded. Betrayals, killings, degeneration and wars were happening all the time. That era of chaos lasted for about 3,000 years. The wood spirit planet had become hell. A look of deep reverence appeared in his eyes as he sighed and said, 20,000 years ago, a mighty lord appeared on the wood spirit planet. He had the heavenly body and wasn't afraid of the heat. He could resist the earth, fire, wind and thunder and even nourish himself. He quickly reached the divine transformation realm and was invincible. He defeated all his enemies and swept through all directions. Finally, under his leadership, a unified and highly centralized wood spirit dynasty appeared. And this heavenly body was known as the Tyrant Emperor. The Tyrant Emperor didn't want to watch the civilization of the wood spirit planet being destroyed and his bloodline being cut off. He tried everything to stop the destruction of the third planet. But after 10,000 years of hard work and the sacrifice of countless people, the Tyrant Emperor couldn't change the trajectory and the expansion of the third planet. So, he decided to run away. In this world, nothing was more important than continuing the bloodline and preserving the fire of civilization. The wood spirit planet was certainly a good place. It was hard to leave our homeland, but it was only the last stop for our ancestors to wander. We are all fighting to survive in this world that is like a sea of bitterness, climbing on this long path. The Tyrant Emperor's suggestion received the support of the entire wood spirit dynasty. The dynasty used all of its resources to build hundreds of millions of space-traveling artifacts of various sizes. Hundreds of millions of cultivators fled to the depths of space, to all the planets that were deemed suitable for life to survive. This plan was called the Fireworks Plan. He pointed at the ancient Dharma artifact from the last era. Yet another shocking scene appeared before their eyes. Chapter 1614. On the dry and cracked earth, rivers of magma flowed. Heat waves surged into the sky and black smoke rose into the sky. The vegetation had long been reduced to ashes. Not even a blade of grass grew. Many mountains and rocks had cracked. This world was dazzling everywhere. It was the result of two stars very close to each other and emitting extreme light. Interstellar battleships lined up densely in the void. Their launchers pierced the sky like mountains. Numerous humanoid creatures stood on the ground or fought in the air. They could no longer be considered human. Their skin was shriveled, and they were so thin that they were just skin and bones. They were covered in wrinkles, and their blood and water had almost all been used up. They were like dried corpses, and only their eyes still flickered with an unyielding flame. Their faces were solemn and quiet, containing an extremely cold light. They were like an ancient well without ripples. Perhaps there was only a slight ripple. That was the desire for life and the determination to continue their civilization. They stepped into the interstellar battleships silently. They didn't wave goodbye, shed tears, or reluctantly bid farewell. They were so calm that it made people suspect that they were just robots without emotions. The cultivators entered the recuperation cabins and stopped their blood and life. Then, thousands of interstellar battleships shot into the sky and headed for the cold depths of the universe. The battleships possessed formidable power and were extremely fast. They pulled apart the distance between them and the ancient planet. Looking down from the vantage point, the entire Wood Spirit star was like an explosion of fireworks. Every cultivator and battleship was a spark. A civilized Mars. Because they didn't know which direction and which location in the universe was suitable for habitation. At that time, the Big Dipper system hadn't contacted us. We knew nothing about this vast universe. Therefore, the cultivators of the Tyrant Emperor era used the stupidest and most tragic method, but it was also the only method they could use, the human wave tactic. The headmaster smiled. The so-called fireworks plan was an expedition to every corner of the universe in every direction. We couldn't miss it. According to historical records, this plan was carried out for thousands of years. At least 1 billion cultivators were annihilated in the universe. Until the Wood Spirit planet was swallowed by the third South Gate planet. And what they pursued was nothing but survival and the continuation of their civilization. During this long voyage, all kinds of situations occurred, but without exception, they were all very tragic. According to historical records, the level of refining in the Tyrant Emperor's era was already very high, but it was still not enough to achieve lightspeed or even sublight speed. Even the Big Dipper star system, which is closer to us, would take tens of thousands of years. This has already surpassed the lifespan of a divine transformation cultivator. Even blood condensation cultivators would find it difficult to achieve this. He released some more images. They were sent back by the cultivators of the Wood Spirit star who had gone on an expedition using long-range branding magic tools. Some extremely cruel scenes were displayed in front of everyone. Some cultivators managed to reach the nearest planets. However, those planets were too large and their gravitational fields were too strong. The moment they landed, they were crushed into meat paste by the violent pressure. It could even be said that it was like a layer of blood film covering a radius of several kilometers. There are also those who run out of power crystals and are frozen to death by the cold waves in the starry river. There are also cases where the ships split apart and the cultivators who are exposed to the vacuum explode like fireworks. That's because the aura within their bodies is exuberant, which will cause great pressure to the outside world. There are also cases where they are cut into pieces thinner than paper by the gales and space fragments. Or, the coordinates in the starry sky are wrong. The ships run out of power and glide toward the endless deep space. The cultivators know that they can no longer return to their homes behind them. This spaceship is my coffin. This dark, desolate space, where I can never return, is my burial ground. Let me remind you, fellow Taoists. In the process of the expedition to the Sea of Stars, the cultivators who were already on their way kept sending back these images. However, the fireworks project that has been going on for thousands of years did not stop. The teacher said calmly, but when he reached this point, his eyes were slightly red. Crystal tears were swirling in his eyes as if they were about to roll down. The sky gradually darkened. The sun of this place, Alpha Centauri, fell to the other side of the mountain and below the horizon. The blood-red glow gilded the messy Xiantian mountain range, the corpses, the bloodstains, the broken ships, and the war flags that were stuck into the ground. On the other side, the sky had turned dark blue. The bright stars were like the eyes of the ancient cultivators, overlooking this vicissitude world. At some point, the cultivators from the ruins of immortality who had been forced to kneel and submit to Jiang Tian stood up. The fear, panic, and shock on their faces had completely disappeared. They seemed to have forgotten that Jiang Tian had just killed the divine emperor of fire and the sect masters of many grotto heavens. They seemed to have forgotten that there was a peerless god of war standing in front of them. A mixture of sadness and pride surged on their faces. It was as if a patient who was about to run out of oil had been injected with a dose of Dolores, which instantly restored their vitality and vigor. Some of the cultivators were agitated and generous. Some of them shed tears. Some of them even had flames of fighting spirit burning in their eyes. The images presented by the teacher moved by Mushue slightly. Her eyes turned red. It turned out that the cultivators of the wood spirit star, the former invaders, were actually like the ancient sages of the ancient celestial court. They had all faced the crisis of the end of the world and fought arduously for the continuation of their civilization. They had all paid extremely tragic sacrifices. She even felt a little sympathy for the cultivators of the South Gate Galaxy. She looked at Jiang Tian, only to find that Jiang Tian was also listening very attentively. There was even a hint of sympathy in his eyes. But in the end, before we could find a new place to live, the wood spirit star was destroyed. The third planet of the South Gate was too close. The flames of the star shattered the wood spirit star. The gravitational field was too strong. It swallowed the entire wood spirit star. The teacher's voice sounded faintly. It was full of sorrow, like the rustling autumn wind and the falling yellow leaves in the sky. Many people were shocked and felt a surge of sadness in their hearts. He pointed in the air. The image of the Dharma artifact of the ancient times changed again. There was a bright light. Although it was a picture from more than 10,000 years ago, it was still dazzling and extremely bright. It was as if a sun had risen above the Xiantian mountain range and shone over 1,000 miles. At this moment, the ruins of immortality was completely silent. Only the wind could be heard. Whether it was mortals or cultivators, whether it was nobles or officials, whether it was servants or servants, they all looked up at the scene in the sky. They saw it. An extremely bright spot appeared on the surface of the third planet of the South Gate. It was like the door of a furnace. The strong radiation from the depths of the star passed through the hole, penetrating the photosphere, troposphere and chromosphere and shone directly on the wood spirit star. On the hemisphere exposed to the light spot, the living beings outside were burned in a few seconds. Even the golden cores of cultivators melted in seconds and the nascent souls were torn to pieces. Then, the material inside the third planet gushed out of the hole, forming a 100,000-mile flame fountain. The temperature of the material was as high as 10 million degrees. Some of it fell back to the surface under the effect of gravity, while some reached the escape speed and shot into space. Looking from the wood spirit star, the third planet seemed to have grown a brilliant fire tree. After about half an hour, the top of the fire tree intersected with the orbit of the planet. After another half an hour, the moving wood spirit star came into contact with the top of the fire tree. Then, it moved in the ejected material belt for 2 hours. During this time, the planet was moving inside the star. The ejected material was still tens of thousands of degrees Celsius after being cooled by space. When the wood spirit star moved out of the ejected material belt, it was already a celestial body emitting a dark red light. Its surface was melted and a sea of magma covered everything. There was a white trail behind the wood spirit star, which was the evaporation of water vapor. After 10,000 years of light and 2 hours of moving inside the star, it could be said that the star was completely dehydrated. Then, the trail was blown away by the solar wind, and the planet turned into a comet with long white hair. At this time, there was no life on the surface of the planet. It was destroyed, but the fuse of disaster had just been ignited. The ejected material belt created a huge resistance to the wood spirit star. After the planet passed through it, its speed decreased and its orbit dropped a little. The fire tree was like the claws of the sun, pulling the wood spirit star down again and again. After passing through the ejected material belt about 10 times, the wood spirit star would fall to the surface of the sun and be completely devoured, turning into stellar material and becoming part of the third planet. Chapter 16:15. Many people were silent, but tears were rolling down their cheeks. How many of them survived? A cultivator asked in a low voice. The explosion of the third planet destroyed everything in the South Gate 1 planet. Even the Overlord was turned into a rain of light and shattered in the sky. The crystal warships and space cities that were escaping from the wood spirit planet were all destroyed. Only a few of them managed to escape. They were behind another planet, and that planet was used as a cover when the third planet exploded. Only 30,000 people survived, less than 1 in 100,000. The master's voice was very soft. A sad and miserable atmosphere enveloped the entire place. Everyone felt extremely miserable. The wood spirit planet was their home planet, their ancestral land. It used to be prosperous and grand. It was said that there were 1,000 soul formation cultivators, and some even had the chance to enter the void return level. That was a golden age. Heroes rose together, races stood in great numbers, and all kinds of talents came out. They were like stars in the sky, shining brightly and illuminating the ages. And yet, it ended in such a way. There were so many living creatures and talents on the wood spirit planet. They struggled for 10,000 years, but they still couldn't escape the fate of their home planet being devoured by a star. How sad and miserable that was. A civilization with a history of 1,000,000 years was turned into ashes and rain of light in 8 hours. Everything ceased to exist. In front of such a magnificent force of nature, the rise and fall of countries, hatred, death, war, peace, killing, celebration, sadness, anger, desperation, joy, countless scenes, and the thoughts of countless people were not worth mentioning. They could only be turned into dust ruthlessly. The great Tao was merciless. The world was heartless and treated everything as dogs. Only then did they realize the profound meaning of those words. Even a star that was like a speck of dust in the universe was too insignificant for a cultivator's life. They would be crushed easily, not to mention in the vast universe. In fact, the old man and the old ruins emperor were among the lucky ones who escaped. The old voice said again. Right then, the master was like an old man who was basking in the sun under the city wall and telling the children about the past. The master said with a complicated expression. The old ruins emperor and I were both born in space warships. These spaceships were the lowest level spaceships. Their crystals and array patterns could not guarantee long-distance travel. They were all stuck in the territory of 2 stars South Gate. 10,000 years ago, Alpha Centauri was just a lonely star without any planets. Perhaps it had existed before, but just like the wood spirit star, it had been swallowed up by the chaotic stars in the long river of history. We received education and cultivated there, but most of the time, we were condensing our blood and halting our lifespan, as if we were hibernating. Each and every tiny spaceship was like a leaf in the ocean, hanging alone in the cold and desolate universe for 1,000 years. Although the headmaster did not elaborate, everyone could imagine the feeling of loneliness and helplessness. Until one day, the headmaster looked at Jiang Tian and the great co-warriors, bowed deeply, and said with sincere reverence, the wanderers of the deity land of the previous dynasty, with their great magical power and great vision, used the vast stars as their ships and the world-shaking divine formations as their sails, steered 67 stars and embedded them into the orbit of the South Gate 2 stars. Only then did we see the hope of finding a place to live. Don't make it sound so nice. You're like a bunch of bandits, occupying the deity land like a turtledove occupying a magpie's nest. The great co-warriors were indifferent, and Tu Fei even sneered. Don't argue. Let's hear what Mr. Headmaster has to say. Jiang Tian looked calm. There was no sign of emotion on his face. His eyes were as deep as an old well. No one knew what he was thinking. This old man certainly knows about the crimes we committed 10,000 years ago, but I'd like to tell His Majesty and fellow cultivators that we had no choice but to do what we did back then. The headmaster's hair was white and his body was slightly bent. He looked like an honest old man. His face was full of shame and grief. He said with a pained expression, the descendants of the wood spirit star weren't warmongers. At that time, we only wanted the permission of the ancient heavenly courts to live in the deity land. We were willing to hand over our cultivation arts and inheritances, and even all the spaceships and resources under our control. We even knelt down and begged for mercy. We were even willing to sign a divine soul contract with the AO Emperor and the other ancestors. However, the AO Emperor and the other ancestors seemed to be very wary of us. They closed the space barriers and locked the sky with divine arrays. They didn't allow us to set foot in the deity land and other worlds. This process lasted hundreds of years. At that time, our space cities and spaceships ran out of energy crystals. The cultivators didn't even have a place to live. That was when we forced our way into the deity land. When we were attacked, we had no choice but to fight back. As a result, the war escalated and broke out step by step. Do you know that those who enter without permission are considered bandits? Jiang Tian snickered and remained unmoved. He said, the celestial land is our homeland. You barged in recklessly. Of course, we have the right to kill you. Even if you were all skin and bones at that time, even if you didn't have a roof to cover your head, without my permission, you can't enter my house. Teacher, you are so eloquent. Do you still have no intention of repenting? Jiang Tian's deep eyes shone with a cold light. No. This old man certainly knows he made a huge mistake back then. The headmaster held his fists and bent low. His white hair was shivering in the air. With a sincere face, he said in a sorrowful voice, 10,000 years ago, the South Gate Galaxy fought with the wanderers of the deity land. The sky collapsed and the land sank. The beautiful deity land became a hell on earth. Countless people were killed or injured. This old man is guilty. The Ruins Emperor is guilty, too. This old man is willing to die to apologize to the AO Emperor and the ancestors of the previous dynasty. Everyone was shocked. The headmaster had lowered his head. Headmaster, why are you guilty? Why are we guilty? We're just looking for a place to live. Don't we have the right to live? Some cultivators were heartbroken when they saw the headmaster lowering his head. They burst into tears and roared, beating their chests and stamping their feet. This world has always been a dark jungle. Natural selection, survival of the fittest. Whoever has the bigger fist is right. The headmaster and the old Ruins Emperor were originally stronger than the cultivators of the ancient heavenly courts. They could have taken it by force. But they didn't take the deity land by force at first. Instead, they offered gifts out of respect and negotiated nicely. They only took action when they were forced into a corner. How can you blame the headmaster? Someone was indignant and said hatefully. It was the AO Emperor and the others who didn't know what was good for them. Our wood spirit planet's heritage cultivation techniques are compatible with the South Gate solar system's nomological Great Tao. If AO Sovereign and Company were to open the door and not seal the stars, respectfully inviting the Ruins Emperor and Mr. In, the cultivation techniques of the two solar systems would definitely produce resplendent sparks. They might even be able to research universal-level laws and control them. It would have created another glorious era. But in the end, the ancient heavenly courts were arrogant and refused to cooperate with the Ruins Emperor. Their cultivation arts and divine powers couldn't resonate with the world. They even suffered a backlash from the great Tao of the world and entered an era of Tao damage. Cultivators died like rain. A yellow-robed cultivator shook his head and sighed regretfully. All of you are gravely mistaken. The headmaster's dignified gaze swept across everyone. His voice was as loud as a bell as he shouted, if this universe is truly a dark, cruel, and bloody primitive jungle, we cultivators should also burn our lives and let out the flames of civilization to illuminate the world around us. No matter how weak, short, or insignificant the flames are, we must burn and bloom. We don't have to wait for the torch. If the torch doesn't come, we'll be the torch that leads the way. He stared at the yellow-robed, cosmic Darwinist, and angrily rebuked, just as you said, whoever has the bigger fist is the one who makes the most sense. Now that my fist is bigger than yours, would you think that I'm right if I killed you for no reason? The yellow-robed cultivator trembled in fear. He knelt on the ground and said with a trembling voice, I know my mistake. Chapter 16:16. Maybe it was a crucial moment in the peace talks with Jiang Tian, or maybe Master was merciful, but he didn't punish the yellow-robed cultivator. Master retracted his gaze and sighed. You have to remember. Building is always more meaningful than destroying. If the old man and the ruins emperor had been more patient back then, they might have been able to get Ao Huang's approval and build a glorious era together. Instead, the sages have been dead for 10,000 years and see each other as enemies. The two sides have been at war for 10,000 years. The world is collapsing and people are dying. I'm sorry. At that moment, hundreds of millions of cultivators in the ruins of immortality bowed their heads in respect at the same time. His Majesty Tai Chu, 2,000 years ago, the Sky Palace observed that the third star, which had reached a stable balance with the South Gate 10,000 years ago, has expanded rapidly this time and is moving towards the second star system of the South Gate. After careful calculations, the third star will reach the orbit of the ruins of immortality in 30 years. When that time comes, the fate of the ruins of immortality will be no different from that of the wood spirit planet. Master looked at Jiang Tian and the other cultivators and bowed respectfully. In fact, the old ruins emperor ordered an expedition to Earth because he expected this day to come and find another place to live. But it's different now. Senior absolute beginning strength is unparalleled, and he controls the supreme divine laws. Moreover, he is proficient in formations, weapon refinement, and various other supreme techniques. I think that if we work together, we will definitely be able to find a way to deal with the third star of the South Gate. He directly knelt down. Headmaster, my name is Yu Sheng. In this life, I am willing to perform the etiquette of a disciple to Senior Tai Chu. I am willing to represent the empire of the ruins of immortality and sign a spiritual contract with His Majesty Tai Chu. The bloodline of the ruins emperor will abdicate the throne and establish a united empire. We will worship His Majesty Tai Chu as the new master of the celestial court. At that moment, the entire ruins of immortality was dead silent. Above the Xiantian mountain range and in front of the light screen, hundreds of millions of people watched this scene in disbelief. They were extremely shocked. Yu Sheng was probably derived from the meaning of surviving a disaster after experiencing 100 difficulties. This name was very unfamiliar to the cultivators of the ruins of immortality. They only knew the two words, master, because it was too loud. He was a master of the academy. The saint that appeared once every 5,000 years was like a brilliant star that hung high above the ruins of immortality. His light illuminated the heavens and the earth, illuminating the past, present, and future. He could even be considered the old ruins emperor's teacher. He was like a titan of the northern dipper, and his status was exalted and noble. But at this moment, he had actually condescended and abandoned that supreme respect, bowing his head and admitting defeat to a cultivator from a remote planet. This was simply inconceivable. However, some living fossils who had lived for thousands of years understood why the headmaster had made such a choice. Jiang Tian had slaughtered Divine Emperor Lai Hua and killed 18 semi-god realm warriors in a row. This already proved that Jiang Tian was qualified to fight against the three top giants. He also had the strength to crush the 100 semi-god realm warriors from the ruins of immortality. Of course, if they joined forces, Jiang Tian would naturally be in danger. However, if he retreated unscathed and counterattacked, then the three of them would be in deep trouble. After all, this vast deity land belonged to the empire of the immortal ruins, as well as the headmaster and the sword god. They were in the open, while Jiang Tian was in the dark. Jiang Tian could totally sneak around and assassinate them one by one. It would take him 10 years to kill them all. Besides, the third planet of the South Gate would bring about a world-ending disaster, which meant that the cultivators of the ruins of immortality would have to divide their attention. What was the point of fighting with Jiang Tian at this point? Even if they killed Jiang Tian, who would be able to escape if the world-ending crisis wasn't resolved? The outcome would still be the same as what happened on the Wood Spirit planet. If they shook hands with Jiang Tian and the other heroes, they would have an extra powerful arm to help them avoid the danger of being destroyed. And to Jiang Tian, this peace negotiation was completely acceptable. Because he was regarded as the master of this world, he could completely complete a large-scale migration and let the descendants of the wanderers in the deity land enter the ruins of immortality. The crisis on Earth would also be resolved and they would have achieved their goal. This battle was a complete victory for Jiang Tian. What was the point of Jiang Tian killing the headmaster and the others? The key was to solve the problem of the expansion and movement of the 3 planets of the South Gate. Taichu Emperor. Greetings, Your Majesty. The leaders of the sects and the leaders of the families all knelt on the ground, fearing that they would be killed like Divine Emperor Liaohua if they were one step too late. The fact that the headmaster knelt and bowed his head completely crushed their rebellious hearts. Even the headmaster of the academy, who was known as the ancestor of all arts in the ruins of immortality, bowed his head to Jiang Tian. What right did they have to resist? He defeated the enemy without a fight. The Taichu Emperor is invincible. Niu Duotian exclaimed. In his opinion, Jiang Tian had already destroyed the fighting spirit of the people of the ruins of immortality. Those who are good at fighting have no achievements. They can win without shedding blood. Tu Fei, the Green Flood Dragon King, and the other great bandits all had looks of admiration on their faces. Their respect for Jiang Tian had reached an extreme level. Tian Shu even gulped down a mouthful of liquor and shouted happily. In terms of combat power, Jiang Tian had always been steady in every battle. He had never taken any risks and he had never been greedy. When he wasn't strong enough, he would close the space barrier, avoid the sharp edge, hide his strength, and cultivate in seclusion to improve his cultivation. When he didn't have enough materials, he would wander in the lower world, using battle to nurture battle, and plunder cultivation resources everywhere. If he couldn't win, he would flee thousands of miles away, strategically taking a roundabout route. In fact, escaping 1,000 miles away was rare because Jiang Tian would never fight with an opponent he wasn't confident in. Today, after a long period of accumulation, Jiang Tian finally had the ability to turn the tables. He killed a divine emperor in one battle and 18 soul formation grand cultivators in one battle, shocking the 9 heavens and 10 earths and intimidating the entire ruins of immortality. Master, we can agree to this condition. Yun Zhongzi looked calm, but many thoughts flashed through his mind. In the end, he spoke with his immortal will. The purpose of the war had been achieved. There was no benefit in fighting anymore. In fact, they had no choice but to invade back then. Besides, too much history has passed. There's no need to start a new hatred. Now, the most important thing is to solve the problem of the South Gate 3 stars. Bai Mushua's heart suddenly softened. It seemed that the empire of the ruins of immortality wasn't so hateful anymore. Alas, His Majesty Tai Chu will be the master of the deity ground from now on. He's only a nascent soul cultivator and he's less than 40 years old. At this moment, looking at Jiang Tian who was being worshipped by the headmaster, countless people were shocked and full of admiration. They couldn't wait to be in his place. A real man should be like this. Many people sighed in their hearts. They knew that from now on, there would only be one voice in the ruins of immortality, and that was the voice of the new celestial arch, Kang Te Chu. Headmaster, if you admit your mistakes and turn over a new leaf, I won't kill you. Jiang Tian calmly walked toward the headmaster while speaking with a calm expression. He spoke without any emotion. Just when everyone thought that the dust had settled and even the headmaster was smiling, the headmaster suddenly smiled. Suddenly, a cold light burst out between Jiang Tian's fingers and slashed at the headmaster. There was no howling wind, no shaking of the sky, and no reversal of the sun and the moon. Between heaven and earth, there was peace. A gentle breeze blew and white clouds floated gently. But in the next moment, the headmaster's body, which was dozens of miles away, suddenly split open from the middle. Blood dyed the sky red. His jade-like divine bones were broken, and his glittering internal organs were flying. Even his divine treasures were cut in half. After the cold light split the headmaster, it shot into the sky like a dragon and soon fell into Jiang Tian's hand. It was a quaint sword with a quaint design and a dark glow. The heavenly sword. Jiang Tian used a killing move right from the start, not showing any mercy. This time, a strange change happened. No one expected that Jiang Tian would suddenly attack the headmaster at this time. The cultivators of the ruins of immortality were all stunned. Even the killers of the great bandits were surprised and couldn't believe it. Kang Tae-chu, this old man has come to his senses and sincerely apologized. He is willing to shake hands with you and submit to your orders. He has even signed a divine soul contract with you. Why do you still want to kill me? The headmaster roared with anger, unwillingness, and resentment. The tenacity of a god was made up of pure laws. It was like a second life. As long as a god didn't die, he could gather the chi of heaven and earth, rebuild his body, and be reborn again, just like the DNA fragment left by his original body. Therefore, there was a saying that a soul formation cultivator could have billions of clones and be reborn from a drop of blood. Although this was only a part of the top soul formation cultivators and not all of them had this ability, it was enough to show how terrifying a soul formation cultivator was. A god was tenacious and powerful. His vitality was at least 100 times stronger than that of a nascent soul cultivator, not to mention a soul formation cultivator at the peak. Everyone saw. The broken god of the headmaster reassembled in the air with difficulty. He even gathered his divine treasures and body. As he gathered his body, he released all kinds of Taoist artifacts and Dharma treasures. Rays of colorful light shone on the headmaster's body. Each of them could withstand the full attack of a peak-stage soul formation cultivator. But Jiang Tian's attack was even more terrifying. A black sword mark, extremely deep and dense, couldn't be eliminated on the headmaster.